Good evening. Hope everyone has done well.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good
Let
evening.
me go ahead on and call to order our budget, second reading of the budget for fiscal year 21 and proposed 22 and proposed 23. Second reading budget. I'm asking Ms. Mathis to call the roll for attendance.
All right, certainly. Malinowski,
Here.
Pugh, McBride, Livingston,
Here.
Teresa, Joe Walker, Darren,
Here.
Overture Walker,
Present.
Mackey,
Here.
English, Newton.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, I'm here.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
The next item is approval of the agenda for our budget second reading items. Again, for fiscal year 22 and proposed 23.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
It's been moved.
Second.
Proper second. Mr. Brown, anything different reference agenda?
No, sir, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That brings us, let me ask the clerk to call the roll for the motion to adopt the agenda.
Certainly. Malinowski,
Yes.
Pugh,
Yes.
McBride, Livingston,
Yes.
Teresa,
Yes.
Joe Walker, Darren,
Yes.
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
McBride is here, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, with that said, you see the topics on our agenda is regarding our ordinance for the fiscal year 22 budget and proposed 2022 budget. I'll now turn it over to administration.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick opening remark from me. Just wanted to say thank you again to the members of the council and as well as to those community members who are interested in the budget for this fiscal year. We are continuing to work with some of those agencies as well. But for right now, this is the information that we have to offer to the council. And with that being said, we'll move forward with the agenda as printed.
Chair Livingston, may I be recognized?
Yes.
So good afternoon, members of council. James Hayes, Budget Director. So this afternoon, we'll be going over the motions list that was previously distributed to council by order of everything that's on the motions list. So we'll go by the order of the millage agencies, grants, general fund, special revenue funds, debt service, and enterprise. For those who are new to the process, each item on the motions list has a item number, and it also has the page reference in the updated budget book where you can find the backup information that was presented during the previous budget workshops. There's some items that are affiliated. They have a letter by, for example, the very first item with the Richland County Recreation Commission. It has item one, but it also has an affiliate item, so it's 1A. So the chair normally opens up by saying, we entertain a motion thereof, but of course, any council member can make a motion, but we typically go straight down the list unless a council member groups things together. So we'll start with the chair's permission at item number 1, which is the Richland County Recreation Commission.
Mr. Ms. Hayes, let me just make a couple comments before you get started. Again, let me thank my colleagues for the time they spent with this process so far. It's a very long process. I want to thank the constituents for participating tonight, to listen in, and to what we're about to do as we start of our second reading. And please keep in mind, nothing is final tonight. This is the second reading of the budget, so things can change or not change between now and our third reading of the budget. So just want you to keep that in mind. And just to follow up on a little bit of what Mr. Hayes said to my colleagues, as you look at your budget list, and for example, if you see on your budget list, the first category is millage agencies, you can choose to make a motion for each of those agencies individually, or if you have a motion to group several of them together, you can do so. It's like a regular meeting. If someone grouped 4 items together, and you want to pull one of them, or you don't agree with any of them, you can pull one and we can vote on the 3, or we can vote on all 4 of them. It's a process like we normally do with our voting procedure. Mr. Hayes will try to keep us in order in terms of going by category, so that way it's a little easy for us to follow the process. Mr. Hayes, that's about all I have.
Okay.
You may proceed.
Okay, thank you so much. So again, as I mentioned, we're at item number 1, which is the Richland County Recreation Commission. And you see the amount that they are requesting to be funding at $16,129,600. But there's also an affiliated item 1A as well.
Let me apologize, get my participant list up. Ms. Malinak, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 things, and then I'll make a motion. Number 1, Mr. Hayes, I can't speak for anyone else. I'm glad I have this hard copy in front of me because I need a magnifier to see what you got there. I don't know. There you go. Okay. Now, I just like to clarify either from the administrator or Mr. Hayes, when we went over this initially, we were advised that if we had a no mill increase on millage agencies, that would result in a no tax increase. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Okay. Based on that comment, Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion that numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 all be funded at the no mill increase or less.
Second.
Okay.
It's been moved and properly second, that all of those agencies be funded at the no mill level. And if I'm sorry, Mr. Rachel, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Malinowski, did you intend to include 1A, or are we taking that up as a separate item?
No, I did not, because that will put it over the no mill increase. So I was just doing the straight numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8.
But we would take that one up. We would take that one up later when we get to perhaps the general fund. But yeah, we will take that one up though, since it's not included.
Right, but it's not included in my motion.
Right.
Thank
But
you.
we will take it up though. Any further discussion? If not, I'll ask Ms. Mathis Coverall.
Certainly. Malinowski,
Yes.
Pugh,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Tracio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton,
Yes.
Motion passes.
And with that said, if there's no objections, I'll move the A portion of 1A at the end after debt service. Thank you. That concludes our millage agencies for second reading. Now that brings us to grants on your sheet for the 2002 fiscal year. Chair, entertain a motion. Mr. Malinowski, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I notice in this particular category of grants that there are some items the administrator has no recommendations on. Therefore, my motion would be to accept the administrator's recommendation where there is one and to approve last year's funding for the agencies in the amount they received last year or less, providing that a request was made for funding.
Second.
The motion is moving properly second. Any discussion reference to the motion? Ms. Mackey, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I just get Mr. Hayes to maybe clarify if we move forward with that motion, how does that impact, or what is the total amount of that? Are we still in line to, I guess if we accept all of it, does that go over the allotted amount? That's what I'm asking.
Okay, so if I'm thank you, Ms. Mackey, for that great question. So if I'm understanding Mr. Malinowski's motion, he's saying basically there's two parts: that to accept the administrator's recommendation where there is one listed, but for where there is not one listed, to fund those at the prior year level. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Hayes, and that's for items 9 through 24 inclusive.
Okay, so I'll focus on the H-tax one. So the administrator is not recommending that we use any fund balance, just use revenue. So if council opts to fund the groups outside of the county administrator's recommendation, you would need to use approximately 1.6 million in H-tax, again, not general fund, but H-tax fund balance. Does that answer your question, Ms. Mackey?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
And Mr. Hayes, is that how those agencies were funded last year?
Right. So for the current year, FY21, I think we budgeted roughly 6.8 million or something another like that in revenue, and we also budgeted 2.6 in H-tax fund balance.
No,
for FY21, but the county administrator, of course, is not recommending use of fund balance for FY22. So hence, if council funds,
Ms. Hayes, that wasn't my question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My question was, last year, the lump sum, the agencies that Ms. Malinowski is referring to, those agencies were funded, there were general fund money to fund those agencies last year, correct?
Right. Okay. Right. So now the lump sum are not under grants; they're under the general fund. So we're not in that section, sir.
Well, the lump sum, I'm betting the lump sum. They were funded by general fund last year, correct?
But you're talking about lump sum. Are you talking about ordinance? Which are you referring to H-tax, sir?
The ones that Ms. Malinowski just made the motion reference.
Right.
Yes.
So that's what I'm saying. So you're asking me where they
including H-tax.
You're asking where they funded with fund balance last year.
Yes, were some of those funded from fund balance last year from the H-tax fund balance?
Yeah, and that's what I was beginning to answer at first, sir. Yes, right. For FY21, we're using both revenue and fund balance to balance the budget for FY21. So that is correct, sir.
And that's what we did last year. And there's approximately what, about $13 million in that fund balance?
That is correct, sir.
And which is the reason, I just want to clarify the reason why that motion is made that way, and the reason why we do this on an annual basis, simply because we have that huge fund balance. One way to avoid that is in other words, if we never use it, then we'll just keep building and we'll have more money sitting there just not to spend.
I did want to give one more clarification for Ms. Mackey's question, and that is with the accommodations tax. Because the A-tax revenue has dwindled significantly over the last several years. Even though we have approximately requested, we are looking at budgeting $325,000 in accommodation tax revenue. Because that fund has a negative fund balance, Director Ham could chime in now, but I want to say it's like 200-something thousand. We didn't have the ability to use all of that projected revenue to fund accommodations tax. So if the accommodations tax groups are funded at anything more than that 100,000, it would cause a issue. But if you're going with the administrator's recommendation, that would be sufficient.
And for clarification, Mr. Hayes, so what we'll be talking about there is you have $100,000 from the administration's recommendation, correct?
That's correct, sir.
Now, did the Columbia Metropolitan Airport not receive accommodation tax grant funds last year?
They did, but the amount, I think, I don't have right in front of me, but let's say, for instance, they got 92,000 last year. This year, the committee has recommended them 25,000 because the committee didn't have as large of a budget to work with because we needed to make some adjustments on the accommodations tax due to the dwindling revenue. And then also we needed to take care of the negative in that fund balance. And then some other reporting issues that we have to deal with in terms of the TURC commission.
And the way Mr. Malinowski made this motion, I don't think it included that. I think it only included 100,000.
Right, that is correct, sir. But I just wanted to give a clarification to Ms. Mackey. That's correct.
Okay, yeah, just to make clear that there's, but you put them together, it sounded like you were getting general fund money from both. That motion led to general fund from both accommodation and hospitality, but it doesn't affect the administrator's recommendation regarding accommodations tax. Thank you. Ms. Teresa, you're recognized.
Thank you. Ms. Mackey, did you have a clarifying question after that? I'll let you go if you do.
Thank you, Ms. Teresia. It was really just, I wanted the motion to be repeated again so I could understand and make sure, but please ask your question.
Okay, thank you. Yes. So with the A-tax balance, the current recommended budget that's before us, if we approve that, do we expect to pay off or I guess pay back the negative balance and be in good standing in that account going forward this year?
Chair, may I be recognized?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so that's the intention. So we're projecting revenue for FY22. Again, these are early projections. We're hoping with the pandemic going up, hopefully lessening, the numbers for tourism will start to go up. So we're projecting revenue for accommodation tax to be $325,000. Normally, we give the committee all of their projected revenue to budget, but this time we did not do that because we had a negative fund balance. So the intention is to cover the negative fund balance to adjust some issues that were brought about through our reporting agencies, because some funds from A-tax actually have to go to the general fund. And then that remaining portion would be used to fund accommodations tax grants, which was $100,000. But to answer your question, yes, a portion of the new revenue would go to cleaning up the negative in the A-tax fund balance.
Great. And then just one follow-up on that. If the $92,000 motion for the Convention Center and Visitors Bureau were to be approved, would that put us back in the red again?
You got, yes, ma'am. Everything else being equal, because it exceeds what the administrator is recommending for A-tax as a whole, not just for the Convention Bureau, but for the groups as a whole. The groups as a whole are recommended to get only 100,000. So yes, that 92 would definitely create another negative.
Okay, and then is there an amount that could be allocated to fund the Convention Center and Visitors Bureau that would not put us in the red?
Other
for
than what we
instance-
are,
yeah.
they're currently, as part of that 100,000, I think they're slated to get 25. I would have to look it up. But they're slated to get funding. It's just not as
Okay.
much as they've gotten in the past. So
Okay.
I'm not comfortable anything more than the $100,000 that the administrator has recommended.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Anyone else want to speak to the motion?
yeah, Mr. Chair, Bill Malinowski.
Mr. Mallon, you recognize.
Thank you. Based on what Mr. Hayes currently saying and not being comfortable at this point with funding anything other than the administrator's recommendation, let me restate a motion then. And I would say then I would make my motion at this point to accept the administrator's recommendation, and we can discuss anything else afterward.
Would the maker of that motion agree to that?
Second.
I mean, the second of the motion, I apologize.
Second.
Okay, it was moved and properly second. So the motion before us now is to accept the administrator's recommendation. Any questions or clarification on that motion? Ms. Mackey, you recognize.
Yes, just for clarification. So Mr. Malinowski, you're saying for items 9 through 24, accept the administrator's recommendation.
That is it, correct, only that.
Okay, that's it. Stop there. Got it.
Any further discussion? If
Mr.
not,
Chair?
Ms.
Mr.
News, you
Chair.
recognize.
Sorry, I am also struggling with this font, and I support the motion. I just want to understand which numbers I am talking about, either on this grant list or in my budget book. Is there someone who could just enumerate those?
I can, if the chair, I can
Yes,
read
please
them.
go ahead.
Yeah, so that would be item number 9. Item number 9, item number 11, item number 18, item number 19, item number 22, item number 23, and item number 24.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Reference the motion.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Rachel, you recognize.
For items 22, 22A, 23, and 24, that special revenue is only the $500,000 for the Conservation Commission.
Chairman,
Those numbers.
Mr. Hayes, please. Yeah.
Yeah, so for 22 and 22A, those are the grant portions of the Conservation Commission, $500,000, of course, but they also have an operating budget. So that, and then the neighborhood, that is the neighborhood grant portion of the neighborhood redevelopment, $500,000. So those for 22A, 22A, and 23 represent the grant portions of the Conservation and Neighborhood Redevelopment Funds. They're two different funds.
Got it. So we will see more from this department.
In the special
later.
revenue section, that is correct.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions before I call for the vote on the motion? Ms. Newton, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hayes, just to be clear, I don't know if I heard or didn't hear, was 22A included in the administration's recommendation?
If it was not, it should have been, yes, 22. I'll read them again for the record. So
Okay.
it's item number 9, item number 11, item number 18, item number 19, items 22 and 22A, items 23, and item 24 are all administrator recommended.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I believe Councilwoman Barron had her hand up for a while now.
Ms. Barron, I'm sorry, just not showing up on my list, on my thing here. I apologize. Go ahead, please. Thank you, Mr. Walker.
My question was answered, so I did lower it, but thank you, Mr. Walker.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, I'll ask Ms. Ms. Mathis to call the roll for the motion regarding items 9, 11, 18, 19, 22, 22A, and 23. And was 24 included?
Yes.
And 24. Thank you. Ms. Mathis, go ahead.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Pugh,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Tracio,
Yes.
Joe Walker,
Yes.
Barron. Barron. Overture Walker.
Yes.
Thank you. Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. That brings us to item 9A on your agenda. 9A is regarding accommodations tax grant for the Metropolitan Convention Center. That was recommended by Livingston, so I'll briefly speak to that. That was recommended because that was the amount that was provided last year. One of the primary original intent of the accommodations tax was for entities like the convention center for advertising and so forth for our community. The $100,000 is what a committee is an amount that a committee get every year. Well, it's not 100,000, but a certain amount. And I think it's more important to have our convention center served than even to divide it up to 10, 20 different agencies where we can see very little benefit. So I just strongly think that at some point between 9 and 3rd reading, we need to figure out some kind of way to fund our convention center. Going from $92,000 in accommodation tax from 1 year to 0 the next year for our convention center is just unacceptable for what we need to do for our community. That's why I put the motion there, and I, based on what Mr. Hayes says, there is their projection simply says it will not be there. So therefore, you can't do it this year. But it won't be there next year either, because you won't have the convention center to advertise and do what they do to draw business to get to obtain hospitality tax. So I just think that's something we really need to do something with, even if we have to get it from the general fund or wherever we get it from. Mr. Hayes.
Yes, sir.
How much was generated last year for the accommodations tax?
I can get that number for you unless Director Ham had to read off. But if you give me a moment, I can look that up, sir.
This is Director Ham. Can I be recognized?
Yes.
Last year and for FY20, they actually brought in $424,000. However, this year so far, we've only brought in $193,000.
So we brought in this year so far. We brought that amount, and we were projecting only and we're only spending 100,000.
No, we have budgeted this year. We've actually spent 239 so far. We have budgeted to spend 320. We were projecting 320 for this year. We've brought in about 200 so far. So we're already short right now 120,000. But like I said, we still have 2 months to bring in, well, I guess 1 month to bring in revenue, because we're already through May, it's almost June. So we only got about a month left. So we'll probably be negative again this year. And we have the 100,102 negative from last year.
So we're assuming that the economy is not going to pick up and we're not going to generate more hospitality tax revenue?
No, Mr. Chair, may I be recognized?
Yes.
So what I did, so that's correct. So working with Director Ham, so we looked at what we projected the revenue to increase, but we already were in a deficit So I projected a possible another deficit for FY21. So the new revenue would have to cover these old deficits. So yes, we did. So we're projecting revenue to be actually 325. But if we would have gave the committee that whole 325, then how are you going to address the negative from the past 2 years? So yes, we are projecting growth, but we had to pay the negative first, which only left roughly 100,000 to be given to the committee to distribute.
All right, one last question. How much did we generate in accommodations tax prior to COVID?
For fiscal year FY20, it was actually 424,000.
And we're projecting 325 this year? I mean, this new year coming?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Know what you had, Mr. James? James, sorry.
My motion was to spend $92,000 accommodation tax. Staff is saying the money will not, their projection is that the funds will not be there. I'll just warn my colleagues that I would come back with some other recommending some other sorts of funding for that. I can't imagine even $92,000 not compared to convention centers in Charleston and Greenville, almost 3 times what we give our convention centers. So I would just move on and.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
A clarifying question. I thought I heard you say that the convention center was going from 92,000 to 0, but I thought I heard Mr. Hayes say that it wasn't actually going to 0, that they were receiving $25,000 from the A-tax grant. And I just wanted to clarify at this point as things stand, how much money is going to the convention center?
Yeah, so I'll look that up in the budget book right quick. Shouldn't take but a quick moment, but yes, they are getting a portion of those funds. If you give me 1 second, I'll pull that number up to share with council.
Mr. Livingston.
And while you pulling that number up, given the amount of H-tax they also received last year.
Mr. Livingston.
Yeah.
This is ACA Thomas. I can give you that information.
Thank you.
It was recommended that they receive $25,000 this year of the $100,000 allocation, and in FY21 they received $92,000.
Thank you. Mr. Ratio.
I'm sorry, I should have lowered my hand. I had the same question as Ms. Newton.
Thank you. Again, I'll have to withdraw that motion from now, since it says accommodations tax, and I'm being told that it's not available. That brings to item 10. And that is the Columbia Museum of Art, Historic Columbia, and Township Auditorium. So Chair, entertain a motion for item 10. Mr. Hayes, you wanted to speak to those in terms of how they're funded relative to the other hospitality tax agencies because they're orders agencies.
Right. Yeah. So obviously, council has a actual ordinance for those 4 groups to support those. And annually, you all do make an allocation. It's just that this year there's no recommendation from the county administrator. So if you choose to fund those, well, let me back up a little bit. There's 7.4 million that the county that we're budgeting for revenue, and everything that the county administrator has recommended from H-tax that you all have approved thus far, which is the item number 19 and item number 18 and item number 11. If you all were to, outside of those, that would be remaining roughly 2.2 million to fund all groups who have gotten H-tax funding in the prior year. But if you were going to fund them at the same level, you would have to use that additional funds from fund balance. So, but again, just to keep you all aware of it, there's currently 2.2 million available of the 7.4 for H-Tax without using H-Tax fund balance.
Did that question get answered for the person who asked that question? Mr. Ratio?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering if we could get an individual listing of what the amounts are for those entities.
Okay, sure.
Mhm.
James, I think I can answer that for you.
Okay.
Mr. Ratio, are you asking for what they're requesting or what this year or what they received in 2021?
For item 10, just what does that 1,921,186 represent, broken down by the museum, Historic Columbia, Adventure, and the township?
So for the Columbia Museum of Art, it's 765,872. For Historic Columbia, it's 385,143. For Adventure, it's 400,000. And for the township, it's a combined 370,171. And all of this is found on page 96 of your budget book.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have looked there. I didn't know that it was listed out separately there. Okay. And that represents, is that sort of the minimum requirement?
No, this is what they got approved for FY21. Their FY22 numbers are what they requested is different, but this is what they were funded with. This is what they have been funded with generally over the last few years.
Okay. Is there a motion on the floor yet for
Ms.
that?
Newton?
Oh, sorry.
I was going to make a motion, but a slightly different one. And so my motion, and I'm looking at pages 96 and 97 of the budget book under hospitality tax. And my recommendation would be that we fund those agencies that we funded last year at the 2021 level.
I'll second that motion. Now, Mrs. Newton, are you referring to the ordinance agencies alone or special promotions, all of them?
I'm referring to the ordinance agencies and the special promotions that were funded last year as listed on page 96 and 97 of the budget book.
I'll second that. Discussion. Just one point of clarification. That also, yeah, that includes the township auditor. Okay, thank you. Ms. Malinak, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hayes, these are ordinance agencies because we have an ordinance that directs us how we're supposed to provide them funding. And I don't have that ordinance in front of me, but my recollection was that in good times, they would get certain percentages of the amount taken in and they would get an increase. And in bad times, they would also get a percentage of the amount taken in and they would receive a decrease. So I'm trying to find out where we would actually stand with funding based on the ordinance, not based on what they got last year.
Oh, Mr. Malinowski, I would actually have to take a look at the ordinance and of course have an answer for you all before third reading.
Okay, fine. Okay, thank you.
Ms. McBride, you recognize.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this question is for the administrator. Is there a reason why the administration is not recommending this funding?
That was my question too. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. McBride, thank you. So for those items that were not contractual or statutory, and these are items that originate out of council motions, that is the only reason, because these items are items that are brought forward to the table by council. So it's not something that is a ordinance or a statute or something that is a policy decision of the administrator. So that's why, Ms. McBride, that this is in the purview of the county council.
So where would may I continue, Mr. Chair?
Yes, you have the floor.
So since they are ordinance agencies, are they getting additional funding besides this?
My understanding of the ordinance agencies, Ms. McBride, is that the amounts that you have traditionally supported them with is the amount that they would be recommended to receive in general, because that's what they get as your ordinance agency, that you're going to fund them. Any agency that is not an ordinance agency, that's a H-tax agency, is really what I'm referring to.
Okay, so I'm a little confused then, because these are the ordinance agencies, and this was what we recommended funding last year, so I'm sort of confused as to the difference now.
Ms. McBride, Chair Davidson, may I be recognized?
Yes, and then it's Mac.
I just wanted to give a clarification. I think Ms. McBride asked, were these groups receiving any other funding? So Ms. McBride, those 4 groups also receive funding by way of the H-tax committee, because they apply by way. So the committee funding funds them, and then throughout the year, sometimes some council members may use some of their discretionary H-tax. So I just wanted to give the clarification that it's not just the ordinance amount that they get. Many of these groups also apply and receive funding through the H-tax committee. And of course, some council members fund them through the H-tax discretionary.
Okay, and I was understanding what I thought about the H-tax, but I was still thinking that this was an administrative, funding that we normally provide. And that's the reason for my line of questioning. Thank you.
Just for clarification, that's right. It has been in the past. Ms. Nike.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going back to the motion and wanted to just clarification on which items, and then if I can get a total of those items.
So that would be item number 10. And there's an affiliate item 10A, but they're the same. And it's to fund the ordinance agencies for the H-tax. And that total amount would be $1,921,186, which is item 10.
Mr. Chair, may I be recognized?
Let me make sure Ms. Mackey. Okay.
Okay.
Mac, are you through?
Well, that wasn't the motion that I made, and that was why I asked to be recognized.
Oh, I'm sorry. Clarification. Thank you.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So Mr. Hayes did correctly read the motion that is listed as number 10. That, however, was not my motion. My motion was looking at pages 96 and 97 of our budget book, that we fund the same agencies at the 2021 approved levels of funding. And those agencies include the ordinance agencies. So starting on page 96, the Columbia Museum of Art, Historic Columbia, Adventure, Township, and Township Auditorium operations. It would also include special promotions, the CVB, the International Festival, Famously Hot New Year, the Gateway Pocket Parks, the Historical Corridor. Oh, and I'm sorry, I forgot to read Circo, which is also listed on page 26. Those were the items that I was including. And my understanding is that if we funded that at those levels, it would require a small usage of our H-tax fund balance, but I'll let Mr. Hayes speak to that. But that was the motion that I made. And unless Mr. Livingston has changed his mind, that was the motion.
No, that's what I thought I was making a second to.
Yeah, so if Chairman, I'll be recognized to answer the affirm with, so that is correct. So if you all choose to fund those same groups that Ms. Newton mentioned in her motion, it would require using approximately roughly 1.6 million of H-tax fund balance. So that is correct.
I have Livingston, then Malinowski. Just just for an important point of clarification in terms of why these are ordinance agencies, just for a little bit of an extreme part of history. All these agencies were funded out of the general fund prior to the hospitality tax. When we established the hospitality tax, what we did was, in order to save some money from the general fund, because these agencies qualify for hospitality tax, what we did as a council was we took the general fund from these agencies and gave them hospitality tax, and use the funds to create the Conservation Commission, neighborhood improvement, to do other things that we can do that are not hospitality. That's why there was, in my mind at that time, there was expectation for the minister to make recommendations and so forth, because there were ordinance agencies which was pulled from the general fund budget. So just to clarify some confusion in terms of why they're ordinance agencies. Ms. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like clarification because the motion that Councilwoman Newton makes includes all of those agencies on page 96, 97 of our budget book. But on page 97 of our budget book, there was no amount requested by the Gateway Pocket Park or the historical corridor. And I thought the reason was that they already have received the funding they needed, and that's why there was no request for this year. Mr. Hayes, can you address that?
Right. So now I know where you're going, Mr. And I'm going to address Chair, may I be recognized?
Yes, please.
So on the Gateway Pocket Park Blight, so that's not the gateway to the Army group that from a few years back. This is something that originated back under the former administrator that had to do with blight project. So these funds have been budgeted annually in H-Tax. They just have not been expended. So that's on item number 15 for the 14, excuse me. Item number 15, the historic corridor. Those items also originated under the previous administration. They had to do with, I guess, some type of historical markers. So annually, these items have been budgeted in H-Tax. They have just not been expended. But the Gateway project is something that was dealing with the Army, but that's totally different from what you had before you in terms of this blight project.
Okay, so we would just be covering 14 and 15 in this motion then.
That's my understanding, not to.
That was my understanding.
Okay, now I would like to ask the maker of the motion if she'd be willing to accept a friendly amendment. And that amendment is, as I already stated, there is an ordinance that dictates what amount of funds the ordinance agencies should get. And I would like to not make a general approval of last year's funding amount until we know exactly what that ordinance says. We need to know because we can't violate our own ordinances. So I would be willing to go along with a motion with the caveat that ordinance agencies need to be reviewed to see that they're receiving the correct amount according to the ordinance.
Mr. Chair, may I be recognized?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Malinowski, just to make sure I understand your proposal for a friendly amendment, you want to make sure, like, to use hypothetical numbers, if we are obligated to provide $10, that we don't provide less than that. Is that correct?
That's correct. If the ordinance says we've got to give them 10, then we have to give them 10.
Certainly. So, and maybe would you accept amending them a motion to fund at last year's level or the amount required by the ordinance, whichever is greater?
But now whichever is greater, because the ordinance could make it go down. So I think we need to wait and see. Maybe they would only get 1.8 million instead of 1.9. So we don't fund them over what the ordinance says, just like we don't fund them for less than what the ordinance says. So I'm just saying we need to follow our ordinance. That's the purpose of it.
Chairman Livingston, this is the administrator. May I address the ordinance?
Yes, please.
I'm looking here at section 23-69, distribution of funds. And it says the county shall distribute the local hospitality tax collected and placed in the Richland County Local Hospitality Tax Revenue Fund to each of the following agencies. And then it says in amounts as determined by county council annually during the budget process. And then it lists the ordinance agencies that we just talked about, but it does not have a formula as to what we're talking about here. The only formula it talks about, it says that for the amount distributed under the county promotion program, funds will be distributed with a goal of 75% being dedicated to organizations and projects that generate tourism in the unincorporated areas of Richland County and in municipal areas where hospitality tax revenues are collected by the county. But it does not have any other breakdown for the distribution of funds that I can see in section 23-69 of the ordinance.
Okay, what is that dated? You have a year?
Sir, let me take a look, get down here.
That's fine, we can move on. Go ahead.
We can always make a motion, change some authority. Ms. McBride.
Yes,
We don't
Mr.
much
Chair, this is a question for the administrator, Mr. Hayes. In terms of with the accommodation taxes, we did not fare as well, and therefore that looked like a deficit. However, I would like to know, how do we stand with our hospitality taxes, overall funds?
I'll Chairman, I'll be recognized. I'll defer to Director Ham, since she is the CFO. But again, the H-Tax has been trending well. That's why the fund balance is pretty healthy. But Director Ham can give you some little bit more specific numbers.
Yes, Director Ham. This is, so far this year, we've actually brought in about 400,000 more than what we budgeted so far. So we're ahead of what we budgeted for revenue for hospitality. Because hospitality is people food. And so, a lot of people were still ordering food out and getting it delivered. So the hospitality tax kept on coming in. So we are actually above our budgeted revenue for this year.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me ask a question, Mr. McBride, related to that too. Also, too, I want to remind individuals what is the purpose of having a fund balance is, so when you find yourself in times if things are tough, you can help out. And that's why, like I said, we have almost, first of all, it's trending well, and we have about a $13 million fund balance.
And I think this is an opportune time, at least, to fund those ordinance agencies at the level for last year. Thank you.
Mr. Ratio, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that there's a difference between the accommodations tax and the hospitality tax in terms of how they've been trending. Is it appropriate to fund the convention center from hospitality tax?
Yes, very appropriate. And we do the committee gives a very small amount from hospitality tax, but that is how it's funded too, yes.
Okay. What do you, Director Hayes, could you let us know how much hospitality tax goes to the convention center?
Yeah, it's on page 96. I think it's 104,091. 104.
Goodness.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you for pointing that out. There's a lot in front of me, and it is literally right before my eyes. So thank you.
No problem.
Okay.
You through, Mr. Terentio?
Yes. So the amount 104,091 for the Convention and Visitors Bureau, plus the $25,000 from the A-Tax committee recommendation, gets us to about $130,000. Is that, in terms of what you have, the convention center, is that a deficit, I guess, in what we have funded in the past?
Yeah.
Well, they're not getting as much on the A-Tax side, so it would be less than what they've got, because the committee didn't have as much to budget. So instead of them getting 92,000, they would be getting 25,000. But if you all decide to go with the motion that's on the table for H-Tax, the H-Tax amount will remain the same. It will be stable.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Barron, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had one question. Mr. Hayes mentioned about the Gateway Project parks and the blight removal project, as well as the historical corridor. Now, you made mention that those funds are, they haven't used all of those funds, so we will automatically roll over. Is this the balance of what they haven't used?
No, ma'am. So, yeah. So, Chair, may I be recognized?
Yes.
So, no, so I will have to go back in front of me, but they think they've been budgeting since FY18. So we have not used them. So when expenditures are not used, funds just go back to that particular fund balance. So, no, so I would have to go back and do a cumulative total to see what has been budgeted, to see what will be, if council were to go back and use from inception to date FY18 to FY21 to see what would be available. But this amount, it would be, that's in front of you, would be just what you would budget for FY22, but it would not represent things that were budgeted FY18 to FY21 were not expended.
So it wasn't rolled over, stayed in general, went in general fund.
So is that the rationale for, instead of budgeting what they actually spend versus giving them what they usually receive? Was that clear?
So these groups, so these are not actually groups. These are actually projects that were instituted under the previous administration. So there's no group requesting these funds. These have to do with some type of, again, I don't know all the details, but some projects that were under the previous administration that had to do with, again, blight removal. I want to say this may have been associated with the Renaissance. Of course, Chair Livingston may have more information on that. But those two particular, the Gateway Pocket Park blight removal and the one dealing with the historical markers, those are not groups requesting. Those are actually county programs, projects, I should say.
So I understand that. I understand that they're not groups, and I obviously misspoke. But I guess so. What I'm trying to understand is, for instance, this $250,000 is allocated for projects that just have not happened or have not been billed.
Again, my understanding, right? These projects, again, the former county administrator actually will be able to provide more in-depth information. But yeah, these are projects that have been on the table. I think they may have been one time deferred by way of because they were associated with Richard and Renaissance. But I don't have any definitive information about those particular projects. I just know more the fiscal side of what was budgeted each year, but we have not expended.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, so I would like to hear from somebody who knows, whether or not what these funds are for, and if we plan to finalize any projects, because as the administrator has admonished us for the last several months as we started looking at this process, is to look at actual numbers. And if we're asking our agencies and our departments to look at actual numbers, then I would like to see, we're talking about an administrator that's not here and projects that are not here. I understand the Renaissance program that was deferred for a moment, so it's back. So we need those funds. But other projects, are we planning to do them? And if we're not, let's move that money somewhere else. Thank you.
Let me ask a question for the make of the motion that I second. Was the Gateway Pocket and Historic Corridor included in that motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was including that in the motion. My recollection, and I'm open to being corrected, is that council actually approved moving forward with the historical corridor, but that project was not started yet. And so I didn't want those funds to be forfeited. I would certainly be amenable if we wanted to remove the Gateway Pocket Parks from this project. I'd originally included it because I'm not sure where those stand. But my understanding about the historical corridor is that we asked for movement to be taken, and I don't think that it's moved forward. And that's why I wanted the money to stay there to support a previously approved council action.
let me ask staff a question for clarification.
Chair, may I speak on it also?
I'm sorry, you can go before me, whoever that was.
McBride.
You can go before me if you like to.
Those two areas were included in the Renaissance plan, the historical corridor, as well as the blight removal project. And then they were deferred. And then we brought part of it back out of deferral. However, they are still on the agenda with the Renaissance. So I guess I have a question is that, and it's been there because it was a part of those Renaissance initiatives. So once that is approved and we move forward, could we come back and get those funds later if we needed them, Mr. Brown?
Yes, ma'am. You could certainly do that. I mean, council certainly reserves the right to amend the budget at any time. So you could do that. And these funds were funds that, again, that rolled over, if you will, or went back to the fund balance. So, and as you've already articulated, the fund balance is quite large in hospitality tax.
So we have an option, either we can go on and approve them and let them stay as they are, and if we use them, they would be there, or we can come back later and do an amendment. So basically, it's going to end up being the same whichever way we go.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Ms. Newton,
Chairman, you recognized?
Ms. Newton, you recognize.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. McBride, for that clarification. I would just ask there are enough questions about this. If administration could come back to us, my recollection was that we actually removed or separated the historical corridor from the Renaissance so that it could proceed. And Ms. McBride is certainly right in terms of how it works out from a budgetary perspective, but I would just like that clarity on what the council action was. So if we could have that later, thank you.
So did the motion still include the gateway and the historical corridor?
That's the way the motion stands unless somebody wants to amend it.
Any further? And Ms. Malick, you recognize.
Yes, sir, just for clarification, Chairman Livingston, and that is that 10 and 10A are the same. We're not approving this 1.9 million twice, correct?
Oh,
I didn't understand the question, Ms. Malick.
That's correct. There's only one approval for that amount. 10 and 10A are combined together in one amount.
Thank you. So we're voting on 10, what else? And 14 and 15, correct?
Let me check real quick. 10 funding level for the ordinance agencies. Yes, 10.
It
Okay.
also
Would
includes,
you like me to read those items?
Yes, please.
Right, so that would be 10. That would be item number 12. That would be item 13. I'm not sure if you're all including the gateway and historical, that would be items 14 and 15. That would be item number 16. That would be item 17.
I wasn't including 17.
Okay, sorry. So not 17.
Okay, not 17. Okay, everyone clear on what their motion is then?
I've got a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'd like to know, and I could get it for third reading, that the Columbia International Festival, I'd like to know how that became a special promotions item in here. I don't recall that taking place for that dollar amount. You've got in here on item number 12, the Convention Center and Visitors Bureau and the International Festival. The International Festival is a weekend event and it's getting 50% more than the Convention Bureau, which is an all year group of people. So I don't quite understand how that's working. I realize what it says about special promotions, but that just seems a lot to give a weekend event over one of our main entities in the county that brings in tourism and visitors all year long. You want to explain that?
Mr. Malinowski, we'll make sure we jump on that and do some research.
Thank you, sir. I'll wait for that answer before I cast a yes vote. Appreciate that.
To the President, Mr. Ratio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just curious, again, and forgive me if this is somewhere that that's right under my nose. But for 12A, Mr. Livingston's motion, that 351,000, is there a breakdown that you had submitted between those two entities, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, I think it was based on what was in the, I just add the two up, I think.
If you chair, may I be recognized?
Yes.
So it was, so Mr. Ratio, for the 351, it would be 151,000 for Columbia International. And it would be a raise, increase to 200,000 for the Columbia Convention Bureau. It would go from 104,091 to 200. So the combined would be 200,000 for the Columbia Convention and Visitors Bureau, and 151 for Columbia. 151 for the Columbia International Festival. That's 351,000.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I just increased the amount for the Convention and Visitors Bureau. In my motion, that's all I was doing. Everything else would have remained the same on those two items, on special promotions.
Okay. So if I'm keeping track, and I haven't really been very well, but that would be a total contribution for the convention center of $225,000 when you add both funding sources.
I think it was. I think it was 200,000.
Wait, Mr. Chair, may I be recognized? Because I feel like now that I'm looking at it, I'm not sure that 10A is actually included in my motion, which is why I specifically referenced pages 96 and 97 of the budget book to be clear about what I was approving as a substitute motion for what is listed on the paper.
That's right.
So Ms. Newton, I apologize, but make sure you clarify the motion you have again.
Okay, so
as best you can.
thank you. So, So my motion is using pages 96 and 97 of the budget book. And that motion is to approve the FY21 amounts for the hospitality ordinance agencies, special promotions, and tier 3 promotions, but specifically including the Columbia Museum of Art, Historic Columbia, Adventure, Township Auditorium Operations, under special promotions, the CVB and the International Festival, under tier 3, Circo, Famously Hot New Year, the Gateway Pocket and Pocket Parks, the Historical Corridor, and the H-Tax Committee. That was my recommendation.
You did not, okay. Anyone have any questions about that motion? That's not clear. Ms. McBride, you recognize. Ms. McBride, you recognize.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. It appears that 10A, Ms. Newton, what did you leave off from 10A, Mr. Chair, if I could ask that question?
What I recommend was approval at the FY 2021 level. And my understanding is that Mr. Livingston's 10A motion was not FY 2021, but that it represented an increase from that level.
Well, here it says FY 21 level.
The only difference in mine was I increased the convention center amount. That was the difference.
Okay, the motion says FY 21 level.
No, I think you all, so right, exactly. So I'm sorry, Chair, may I be recognized?
Yes, please.
Right, so that's correct. So items 10 and 10A are essentially the same. We're talking about the ordinance agency. So that's what Ms. Newton is recommending, the ordinance agency be at the same thing. Where they differ has to do with item number 12 and 12A. Ms. Newton is recommending that the Columbia International Festival and the Columbia Visitors Bureau remain at the FY21 level of 255,091. Mr. Livingston's motion would increase the Conventions Bureau by roughly $50,000. Well, I'm sorry, roughly $100,000.
That's correct. And Mr. Ratio.
I think I forgot what I was going to ask.
Any other questions reference the motion before us? If not, I'll ask Ms. Master call for the motion. Vote for the motion.
Okay. Malinowski,
No.
Hugh,
Yes.
McBride. McBride,
Yes. Yes.
Livingston,
Yes, with understanding I may have some suggestions for third reading different.
Horacio,
Yes, and I would be curious to hear Mr. Livingston's suggestions.
Joe Walker, Joe Walker, Barron, Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Ms. Mathis,
Yes, ma'am.
I apologize. Yes for my vote, please.
Certainly.
That motion passes. That brings us to, I think Mr. Hayes is item 11.
Oh, that was approved with Malinowski, excuse me, Mr. Malinowski's what the county administrator recommended you all. So you
Right,
all,
okay. We're good. I'll come back to that one. The only difference there was I recommended more for the convention center. That's what I said I'd come back on. 13, we did. 14, we took. We didn't vote on 14, did we?
I believe that was in Ms. Newton's motion. She can
I don't
clarify.
think it was.
It was.
You said the gateway was?
Yes.
Yes, 14 and 15 were in my motion, sir.
Oh, I'm gonna have to reconsider, but I'll do it next time. No, 16.
16 was in her motion.
Was in the motion.
But not 17. You're on number 17.
17 was approval of Councilmember H tax allocation funding. Chair entertain a motion for approval of Councilmember H tax allocations funding level. And the recommendation is the same as last year, which was a 50% reduction from 21. I mean, there's no recommendation, but I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I recommend approval for discussion.
Recommend approval for discussion. Is that at last year's amount or what?
Mr. Chair, at last year amount, we cut it due to, I think, the budget and COVID
Right.
issues.
I
So
second the motion.
What was the motion again?
just second it.
And what was second? I'm trying to make sure the motion was because we have
Leave the
Is the amount
motion.
that's on the sheet is the motion?
Chair,
Okay, thank you. It's moving properly second that we're funded at the same level as we did last year. Ms. Teresa, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this item is, a little bit of a different kind of item because it is allocating money amongst the different districts to kind of at the council member's discretion. One of the reasons that I moved last year to reduce this amount was not just because we were in the middle of COVID, but rather because it would be my preference to kind of ensure that some of the entities that come to us over and over again and that council members are using discretionary funds for, rather than having to come to council members every time, just kind of go ahead and get that funding that they have relied on for so long. It is also my intention to utilize a little, more of those funds for some of the bigger projects, and those are in later motions that we will hopefully consider. I don't have a question really. I just wanted to make a statement about that. I'm still trying to consider how I'm going to vote on this item. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions? And again, that motion was to do the amount that was done last year, which was cut in half last year. So there was money left, more left for the project. Any further discussion? If not, I'll ask Mrs. Mathis to call the roll for the motion.
Certainly. Malinowski,
Which, yes.
Pugh,
Yes.
McBride,
yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Tracio,
Yes.
Joe Walker,
I'm going to abstain. I've been in and out of service and didn't even hear the motion, but not going to ask you to stop and repeat it.
thank you. Barron, Barron,
Yes.
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
No.
Motion passes.
Next, I bring us to item 20 and 21. They're kind of similar in nature. Those are the requests you got for the large destination projects regarding Untitled Tax. That was the volleyball complex as well as FC King's Foundation. Next, the 1010 motion reference item 20 R21 and 2021 combined. Mr. Pugh, you recognize.
Mr. Chair. Oh,
Pugh,
sorry.
and then go ahead, Mr. Pugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion that we send these items to committee to be further vetted.
Second.
It's moved and proper second. We'll send these out to committee to be further vetted. And proper second. Any discussion? If not,
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair.
Hands raised.
I'm sorry. Who, was that Mr. Walker? Who was that?
Mr. Chair, it's Mr. Walker, and I'm not sure if I spoke before Mr. Ratio raised her hand. Happy to get in line wherever I need to.
I'll defer to Mr. Walker.
Mr. Walker, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would suggest that given that we have multiple entities pursuing really, in my opinion, from the due diligence I've done on these two projects, the same end state, and understanding that Richland County Recreation Commission has, for the most part, attempted to coordinate these efforts. I guess I have a little bit of a question and a little bit of a statement. That would be, I feel like there needs to be one point of coordination if the end game is to facilitate a capital project using HTAX funds for some type of travel recreation facility that could encompass all of the various aspects presented to us tonight. And I feel like that point of coordination so far has been RCRC. Is there a way, and Mr. Chair or whomever can answer this, is there a way to actually move this onto the Richland County Recreation Commission's plate and allow them to vet suitors and bring us the proposal they would prefer to pursue, given that they're going to ultimately be girded with responsibility for its maintenance?
Mr. Walker, that's part of the vetting. That's one of the decisions that the committee can make. That's why we're saying take it to committee to vet it. So
Very
that's
good.
part of the
Very
vetting
good.
is how you want to proceed.
All right, you've answered the question. Thank you. I'm good.
Thank you. Who was next?
Newton.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. In line with what you just said, Chairman Livingston, I wonder if Mr. Pugh might consider a friendly amendment to his motion, which is the way that I heard the motion was that it was to vet these two specific projects, but I would like to see us broaden the conversation to the best use of travel, recreation, sports in general. I'm a huge supporter of it for the county, and I would hate to limit it to just these two options, but have us really take a broader look. I don't know if that would be amenable to you, sir.
Mr. Pugh, did you hear that?
Yes, I did. I'll accept the friendly amendment, ma'am.
Thank you.
As the seconder of the motion, I'll accept that also, Mr.
All
Chair.
right. Any further discussion?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Newton, I'm sorry, Ms. McBride, I think that was you.
Mr. Chair, could you help me with how did this recommendation get on the list?
Yes. Normally, if someone would contact me or send me a letter saying they have a project and so forth for the county, and I said that has to go through the budget process, and I asked them to contact Mr. Hayes, and tell Mr. Hayes just put it on the list for council to consider. So that's how I got where it is.
So in other words, anyone can come in and submit a letter, and it doesn't have to come from a council member or from the administration and get on our motion list?
Well, it did. That's what I'm saying. I sent it to administration for them and to consider it in the budget process.
So this is a recommendation coming from administration?
This recommendation put it not for approval, just put on the agenda for council consideration.
Saying it's just, and this is just for a procedural question I have. So anyone can send a letter for any entity requesting to be on the motion list, and the administrator can put it on there. And it does not have to come directly from the council or the administrator.
That's the way that's the way it
That's
is
the
now.
problem.
We can certainly change that, yeah.
And that's the way it currently is. It has always been.
It's what I could remember.
So are we following procedures in doing that? That's my question.
I don't know whether they have procedures to those kind of things or not.
Because this seems like,
check it.
yeah, it appears to be out of sync in things that at least any motion will come directly from a council member or the administrator. So this seems to be out of sync. And
Yeah.
I was just asking for clarification.
And even later, not only clarification, I'd be let's consider exactly how we want to do it in the future.
It seems improper to me, but then I don't know.
Oh, I think there'd be a better way too, so we'll certainly consider that. We just didn't have a procedure for it, so we'll get one. Ms. Barron?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was a little hesitant to speak up, just as being one of the newer members on council, but I did in speaking when Ms. McBride brought the point up. I did feel like and I want to be real clear that I think that travel sport is something that we definitely need to look at in bringing into our county. I just felt like when I look at some of the items that have motions, these seem to be a little awkward in its nature or how they appeared. So I just, I would like to say that we need to look at, if it's not a process or a rule or procedure, that maybe we need to consider one for those items. But I'm definitely in support of us looking at a general way of how we can establish travel sports and be a destination place for Richland County.
Thank you. Ms. Ratio?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a really quick question. I don't believe it was stated which committee this would come before.
No, and I'll certainly decide that in terms of whether it's. I'll need to ask some questions to see whether it has economic development nature, whether I haven't decided that yet. Since we just proposed, I have to think about what I think might be the best committee for it at this point. But it more than likely one of those committees sounds like.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Ms. Newton, you recognize.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add my voice to the choir with Ms. McBride and Ms. Barron in terms of making sure that we have the right process for how outside entities get on our agenda in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll be open for motions and recommendations regarding that. Anyone else?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Malinowski, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I recall putting a motion forward not too long ago when something like this happened at council and it got on an agenda, a regular council meeting. And I believe I made a motion that in the future, all motions had to be sponsored by a council member. Now, I think we need to have the clerk's office look that up and see if that actually did get to the council for passing or not. And if it did, then that's what has to happen with this one. So I would like that clarification. If you send it to a committee and it's determined that it has to go through a council member, then it has to go on a council agenda and go through the proper process. If that was not acted on and is not present in what we said had to happen, then you put it in the committee, I guess, would be the proper way. So that's what I want clarification on.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you.
Any further
Yeah.
discussion?
Mr.
Ms.
Chair,
McBride?
I just
Yes.
want to say that it's not that I don't support the issue, but I'm looking at the proper procedures and based on the information that we've discussed so far, that even we need to look to see if we can commit it to assign it to a committee if it was not presented by a council person. Not that a council person can't decide to present it, but as of now, it's not. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, who was that? I don't see.
Barron.
Ms. Barron, you recognize.
Yeah. So I want to go back to make sure you received this documentation and you in return turned it over to administration, correct?
Right.
So in essence, I guess it did come through a council member.
Yes, I guess you can say this is recommended since I gave it to them and asked them and told them to put it on the list.
Okay.
So council can consider it.
Yeah, because if that is the case, then I guess it's not improper, I would assume. But again, like just some clarification on that.
But it's going to amend it. We'll vet all of that. We'll look at the rules and we'll do all those things, but we certainly can't do it this minute. But I clearly get the message.
Chair, one question, please. So this is coming from you?
Yes, I was going to ask the administrator to look at it and put it on for council to consider.
Okay, so this is your recommendation. All right, thank you.
Yes. Any further discussion? And the motion is to forward to committee, Mrs. Mathis, can you call the roll for the motion?
Certainly. Malinowski,
Yes.
Hugh,
Yes.
Rod,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teresa,
Yes.
Joe Walker,
No, with the caveat that I don't necessarily appreciate the lack of transparency as to how this got before us.
Barron,
Yes.
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton,
Yes.
motion passes.
Does that complete the hospitality, I'm sorry, the grants portion, Mr. Hayes? Mr. Hayes?
Yes, I'm sorry, I was muted. Yes, sir, that does complete the grant section, and you're now ready to move to the general fund section, sir.
Thank you. That bring us to item, 25A. Mr. Hayes, you want to pick up from 25?
So item 25A is the administrator's recommendation for the general fund. These are companion items, 25 and 25A. 25A is the expenditures for the general fund department, and general 25A are the transfers out. That's the general fund support of other funds. So 25A and 25 and 25A are the administrator's recommendations for the general fund. And you can find that on page 5 in your budget book.
Chair, entertain a motion then for the administrative recommendation for 5A. I'm sorry, for 25.
Mr. Chair, I have a clarifying question before I would make a motion.
You recognize me.
Thank you. Mr. Hayes, you mentioned that the administrator's recommendations were 25 and 25A. Looking at the motions list, it looks to me like the administrator also was recommending items 26 and 27. Is that correct?
But that is correct. That is correct, ma'am. That's
Okay.
correct.
Then I move to approve the administrator's general fund recommendations, items 25, 25A, 26, and 27.
Second.
It's moving proper second to approve the administrator's recommendation 25, 25A, 26, and 27.
Mr. Chair.
Is that Ms. Teresa?
Yes, it's Miss.
Yes,
Yes, it's me. Thank you. I have a question for staff. What amount in any of these line items is allocated for the conservation division?
I don't want to speak for the administrator. Which Administrator Brown, would you like me to answer, or would you like to answer?
No, we talking about 25 and 25A, 26 and 27?
Correct. I would assume that this would be under county departments and perhaps transfers out.
No, man, I think you're referring to like there are two items. One of the special revenue items I think you're referring to related to conservation. The general fund amount is salaries associated with some positions within the Richland Water Soil Conservation District and not the Conservation Commission.
And are there overlaps between those salaries or those salaried positions?
There
So
is,
does the,
yes, ma'am, Ms. Tracy, there are some overlaps, and if I could, I'm not sure exactly how it can be of assistance, but I do have a meeting scheduled next week with the district and the Conservation Commission, which I think will help come back to the body with some additional information if you're willing to consider that, Mr. Ratio.
okay, and will those meetings be completed before third reading?
Absolutely, yes, ma'am.
Okay, I would love to hear all of the clarification about what happens in those meetings before we finalize this.
Yes, ma'am, understood. That's my plan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any further discussion reference the motion for items 25, 25A, 26, and 27? If not, I'll ask Ms. Mathis to call the roll for the motion.
Certainly. Malinowski,
Yes.
Pugh,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Tracio,
Yes.
Joe Walker,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Mr. Hayes, item 28.
Yeah, item number 28 is lump sum allocations, which are found on page 89 in your budget book. The administrator has no recommendations.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. McBride, you recognize.
I move for approval of items 28A, 28B, and 28C.
28A, 28, 28A, 28B, and 28C.
Yes.
Second.
It's moving proper second for those lump sum allocations for 28, 28A, 28B, and 28C.
Mr. Chair,
Proper second discussion.
Mr. Chair, I would like to give just a,
You can speak to McBride and then go ahead, Mr. McBride, you can speak to your motion. Ms. McBride, did you want to speak to your motion?
yes, sir, I'm sorry, I was not on mute, I was muted. The three programs that I'm addressing are in different areas of Richland County, but they reside in the communities are in the highest crime area in Richland County. And in fact, and I'm not going to call the specific areas names, but there was a killing 2 weeks ago in the same area. And additionally, there have been 3 murders within the last 3 years within these areas. These programs are recommended in their different areas to actually bring back the community to the community. And it's involving the community members coming together to take back their communities and to fight the crime that's being there. This will be a very strategic, collaborative approach in dealing with crime and in rebuilding the community. We have many different programs that were in and out, but there was not a strategic plan with the developing of these programs. The 3 programs that I'm recommending would really help empower our community as well as address the youth that are in these in this area. I think it's important to note that the communities, the entities that are requesting the funding, many have been in that. One has been St. John has been in the community for over 125 years. The Wiley Kennedy Foundation for 100 years. And the last one is the swim team. Many of our kids don't know how to swim. They don't have the opportunity to participate in swimming lessons, many because they don't have the funding. So this will increase the funding so that any kid that wants to take swimming lessons can take them. Oftentimes these are the communities that do the work. These are the entities that do the work when some of the bigger programs we go to it's so much red paper and red tape that they can't get the community, the citizens can't get anything done. And these are the programs when I need funding assistance, trying to get rental assistance. I've had to go to these programs where some of the larger ones was not able to help because of all of the paperwork. So I ask your support in doing something for our communities and our children. Thank you.
You heard, move proper second. Ms. Newton, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll say thank you, Ms. McBride, for giving that explanation of those projects. I have a question. I'm not sure if this is appropriately done here. For me, for today, I'm going to hold off on voting for any of the lump sum appropriations. And my question is that I would like to introduce a motion that for the lump sum appropriations, that we are asking agencies to come back to us with some sort of reporting about how they use the funds and what the metrics were for success. I don't know if that's appropriate to make here during the budget or if that's something that I have to make at a council meeting. But one of the challenges that I have with the lump sum appropriations is because they can cover anything, and we're not operating from a strategic plan at the county level, it's hard for me to sometimes evaluate these. Whereas for other areas in our funding, we do request more reporting mechanisms than for the things that come here. So again, if it's not going to be appropriate to make that motion here in the budget meeting, I can do it at a regular council meeting, but I would like to see us implement some type of metrics and reporting for the recipients of lump sum appropriations.
Any further discussion? Mr. Malinas, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to know, and I guess Ms. McBride can answer, possibly Mr. Hayes. In our budget book, I noticed that the Wiley Kennedy Foundation made a request for $30,000 and the Greenview swim team made a request for $15,000. I did not see the St. John group in there. Did they submit an application? Mr. Hayes.
I can respond. Oh.
I'm sorry, may I be
You want me to
recognized?
respond?
Oh, I'm sorry.
The Wiley and swim team sent applications in, but they were expanded because the applications they submitted were from last year. And they were expanded this year. And the St. John, this is their first application.
Okay, Mr. Hayes, could you please answer that? Because I see that requests were made for the swim team and for the Wiley Kennedy. I do not see St. John's in here. And then based on what's in our budget book, the amounts are the amounts that are in that budget book. So I don't know about any expansion. I just requested.
Chair, may I be recognized?
Yes, please.
Yes, Mr. Malinowski. So no, we did not currently get a allocation from the St. John's group, but we did get a application from the Greenview Dolphin and the Wiley Kennedy.
And was that for 15 and 30,000 respectively?
Yeah, whatever the requested amounts were, yeah, those were the requests that were submitted back to our office.
Okay, so again, we're going back to the policy here. The policy is that individuals wanting funds should be submitting applications. Is that correct, Mr. Hayes?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, Mr. Malinas?
Is it not the policy of Richland County that groups requesting funding from the county taxes should submit applications?
Right. So with lumps, yes, to answer your question, yes, in shortly.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just to respond to that, this is a motion. These are motions coming from me with an explanation of the program, and the detailed applications will be submitted.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Walker, you recognize.
Yeah, my question is for the administrator. Administrator Brown, given the nature of these entities, and Ms. McBride, hear me clearly, I enjoy and appreciate the mission put forth by each of them and would support that, the missions that is. Administrator Brown, do you believe, given you didn't make a recommendation in the budget book, that this is necessarily the appropriate source or manner of funding for community and 501c3 programs from the county? I'm just curious if you think this is the best means to the end that we're trying to achieve here.
Councilmember Walker, Councilmember Joe Walker, to answer your question, whether or not it's the best means, I think that to the extent that the council member has certainly communicated the importance, I know that council members have a discretionary item that they could use to address items that where they want to, put forth their energy and efforts. And certainly that is also, a possibility here, as another option. So it's tough to say whether or not it's the best way, but I would just say that's, hearing the good discussion now, I would think potentially for the council member to consider that would be maybe another option.
Okay, and as a follow-up, that sounds yeah, okay, as a follow-up. So then let's try and clarify that a little bit. Would you further recommend that these items, and let's leave the debate for H-tax discretionary policy at the county level right now for another date, would you it sounds to me like you're recommending these type items should be considered in our current practice of individual council person discretionary H-tax allocations. Is that a more clear way of saying what you just said?
Yes, sir. Rather than lump sum, that would be probably a clear way of saying that. Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Ms. Mackey?
Mr. Chair, follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
What did you say, Ms. Mackey?
I had a follow-up to Mr. Walker's question and Mr. Brown's answer.
You may follow up.
Thank you. This is an H-tax is hospitality tax, so this would not be appropriate for hospitality tax.
When I
Point of clarification, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Walker, recognize clarification.
Mr. Hayes, I'm sorry, I'll go through the administrator as appropriate. Mr. Brown, could we find out if any of these entities have received H-tax funds in the past?
That clarification, Mr. Walker?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm speaking of the program. Your H-tax has to be for a specific type program. This program, the ones that I'm recommended are not hospitality programs. Now,
I
they
couldn't
may
agree
have
more, Ms. McBride. I'm
Okay.
curious as to whether or not they've ever received H-tax funding in the past.
I can tell you that that some have, because I recommended it when they had events. Yeah.
And Ms. McBride, that's my point, is that how can it be eligible for H-tax funding in some circumstances and not in others?
Because it's based on the program. It's based on the services.
Ms. McBride, you do the clarification, Mr. Walker?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I yield back. I think my point was made. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mackey, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at the list that's on the page 89, just so I'm clear, we aren't obligated to fund any of these listed. Is that correct?
Chair, may I be recognized?
Yes, please.
That is correct, Ms. Mackey. Those groups are purely at council's pleasure.
Okay, and can I ask another question, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please, go on.
Okay, so, and I guess for one example, like the Greater Columbia Community Relations. So by not funding.
We're not on those yet.
That's not the lump sum, that's not what we're talking about? It's in that list. Am I not on the right page?
So that's where it's coming from. But right now, what we're talking about is the 3 that was submitted by Ms. McBride. We're talking about, you can ask that question on 10, but we're talking about.
Okay, so she's only talking about
eight.
She's only talking about 28A, B, and C. 28 was not included in her motion. It was just 28A, 28B, and 28C.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. I'll save my questions.
All right. Ms. Barron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My only, I would like to, especially for new organizations, and I totally support the mission of this motion, as well as what these organizations are doing in the community. I would, however, like to have more information about the actual project that's going to take place. And I don't know, I've said it in a couple of our work sessions, but it would be helpful to have some type of narrative to go along with some of these budget items to be able to make a sound decision. Is that possible? I mean, because it was stated earlier, some submitted applications, some did not. So is it possible for us to have some information? Ms. McBride gave us an overview, but I would, like to see a little more meats and potatoes.
Chair, may I be recognized?
Yeah, you recognize Ms. Hayes.
Yeah, so yeah, so we can I'm gonna answer with the lump sum group. So yeah, the lump sum groups, we do have files on hand that we did share with administration that we can provide to council members. So yes, we do have that, Ms. Barron.
Thank you. I would like to be able to review them so I can really put my full support behind these several organizations that I may not be as familiar with.
Okay, Ms. Barron, you through? So, any other comments? And again, the motion before us is items, they were grouped together, items 28A, 28B, and 28C. And Mr. Teresa, you recognize?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I should have lowered my hand.
Thank you, Ms. Newton, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so my first question is, Mr. Hayes, you mentioned that there were some applications. I guess I'm wondering, to my previous point, what kind of reporting we're getting. So apart from just a narrative, this is what we'd like to do, are we asking organizations to come back and say, this is what we did, this is how we used the funds, and this is what the results of the investment were?
Yeah, so I'm gonna, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, so I'm gonna read something we get from my grants manager. Yes, we do require final reports. So yes, we do ask those groups to turn in at the end of the year what they have used the funding on.
Okay, so I don't know if you would include this in terms of the information that Ms. Barron requested, but I would be interested in seeing, what some of these documents look like. I know in terms of previous organizations that I've worked with, there's been formats where we requested measurements and results as opposed to just lists of expenditures. So I would be interested in seeing that. And I'll just say, since I still have the floor, while we're in discussion, I support a lot of these organizations and think they do great work. I'm just holding back my my vote on them at second reading while I wait to get more information. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Ms. Ratio?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to look at transitions. Are we,
We're
they are
not there
not, are
yet.
they?
That's not one of these items.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Any other comments regarding item 2028A, B, or C?
Mr.
Ms.
Chair,
McBride, right now.
I just want to follow up Ms. Newton's comments. I certainly agree that there should be a form of presentation for at least a prepared report. And that has been done in the past with all of the programs that I've ever recommended. But it's interesting that we give thousands and maybe billions of dollars to some of our even millage agencies, and we have no idea where this funding is being spent. And now you come in and make, not you're making, but we're requesting information, and I would hope that we would not make it very complicated and keep it simple. But I do think we need to be able to document how all money is being spent. We're actually being rubber stampers for a lot of our millage agencies. But then again, when it comes down to little community-based programs in little underserved areas, they always get more work to do for less money. But I do agree that we should have evaluations, or at least some type of report. It's not enough to do a real evaluation. Thank you.
May I respond, Mr. Chair?
Who's that?
Ms. Newton?
Ms. Newton, you recognize.
Just to Ms. McBride's point, I would support that recommendation broadly. I mentioned it in terms of the lump sum appropriations, but to your point about other organizations, I would agree on that as well.
So we should look at them all. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Was that someone asked to speak?
Yes, Ms. Mackey.
Ms. Mack, you recognize.
Thank you. And I guess to follow up on Ms. McBride's recent comment, Ms. McBride, I do think, these are good organizations and we should look at supporting the small organizations. I do think it's hard, at least for me right now, to only focus on these and not look at the big picture as a whole and really evaluate all of the organizations at one time and not just the three presented right now and what that total looks like. So that is a little hard for me right now to not be able to look at this as a whole.
Just gonna hold my comments.
Ms. McBride, you,
No, that's all right. I'll just hold my comments.
any further discussion? If not, I'll ask.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'd like to offer a friendly amendment to Ms. McBride. And that is funding these organizations, the ones that we've previously funded, and funding them at the recommended amount that are in the printed book of $30,000 and $30,000 for the Wiley Kennedy Foundation, and then for the Greenview swimming team, $15,000, and then $75,000 for the St. John Community Development Corporation.
Clarification, St. John's is not in the book, Ms. Barron.
But it was presented that that information would be gotten to us, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Hayes said.
He said they didn't make an application. That's all I know.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair.
Ms. McBride, you recognize.
Yeah, I'm really concerned. We were told, and as we've done each year, we make motions. These are the three motions that I made, and therefore they're not in the book because they came in and they're in the papers that were submitted to you, these three motions. When I submitted them because when we got to the ones that are in the book, I was not going to recommend funding for them because I submitted these three motions, new motions. We were told, and that's what I did. So I'm really confused about the range of these questions.
Mr. Chair, may I?
You recognize Ms. Barron.
Yeah, and so Ms. McBride's point, I am not by any means trying to scrutinize your motion nor not get funds to these three organizations. I'm just merely trying to bring some type of consensus based upon, as a new council member, the information that was given to me as to how it works. And if it's been miscommunicated to me, then I definitely am open for clarification. And that was the reason for my friendly amendment. It is definitely to not scrutinize or to belittle what I believe the good work that these organizations do, nor your intent of the motion.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. McBride.
Yeah, Ms. Barron, I understand that I was trying to, I wasn't speaking directly to you. I was making it clear what happened, that I did submit three motions and it was based on the procedures that are in place. And I knew that you would not probably understand that. So and these motions were to take the place of the two that you saw in the book. And when it came time to that, I was not going to make a motion for those because these are the three new motions that I submitted based on directions from administration for us to submit motions. So I understand. Thank you.
Any further discussion? If not, I'll ask Ms. Mathis to call the roll for the motion for approval for items 28A, B, and C.
Yes, sir. Malinowski,
No.
Hugh,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Tracio,
Yes.
Walker, Joe Walker,
No, no,
Barron. Barron,
Yes.
thank you. Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
No.
English,
Yes.
Newton,
No.
motion passes.
And let me just quickly say for the record, for clarification for my vote, and that is, it is between now and third reading, this contingent upon information that's required between now and third reading.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I concur with you. I did request the information so that I can learn more about the organization and fully support them.
That motion's been moved and carried. That brings us to item 20D. That was a motion made by Livingston. And just let me speak to this motion. With our lump sum allocations, there's, in my opinion, some organizations that make major and significant contributions to our community. Without their support, I think it will leave a significant void in our community. These are agencies that we've funded probably all of them for at least 5 years or more. And to not all of a sudden just not fund them, it's going to create a serious problem. So my motion is to move to fund the following groups at the fiscal year 21 level. That's Capital Senior Center, Clemson University Extension, Columbia Urban League, Community in Schools, Ingenuity, Greater Columbia Community Relations Council, Paramedics Life, support SC HIV/AIDS Council, Senior Resources, and Transition Homeless Shelter. Again, there's nothing new about these agencies. All of them have been funded probably at least the last 5 or more years. I just think that not funding these agencies will, like I said, leave a significant void in our community in many areas when it comes to homelessness and senior citizen resources and so forth. So that is the motion for 28D. So motion moving properly, second discussion. Ms. Malinas, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to state that I know of at least one, and there may be others, I didn't look them up totally, that originally were funded as one-time funding. And you're right, they've been getting money for years and they still are here and still getting money. And until that becomes clarified, I will not support continuing to give agencies money year after year that came in with an initial one-time funding request. Thank you.
Ms. Teresa, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So was your intention in this motion to not approve the other listed agencies or the listed organizations?
There are others.
And only.
No, there are others that I support too, but I didn't want to conflict my motion too much where someone's going to say, well, I don't like this, sound like what Mr. Malinas was saying. No, I didn't want to put too many of them in there. And someone would say, well, that conflicts with what I want and so forth. So, and I assume that other council members would also do the same thing and make motions toward the ones that they desire. So that's why I didn't include all of them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Others that I support too.
Okay.
To best answer your question. And I think others ought to feel free to make motions relative to any other organizations there.
Got it. That makes sense to me. Okay. And then just point of clarification around transitions, because I'm the council member who sits on the board of transitions. Is that not an agency that we have a formal relationship with? To fund?
What do you mean?
In terms of funding, I guess I was under the assumption that because there is a council member that sits on the board, that there is a more formalized relationship in terms of funding.
Well, no, the council members that sits on the board of a lot of these that I mentioned.
Right. I guess that's true. Okay. That's it from me. Thank you.
Ms. Newton, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, just wanted to acknowledge and wanted to make a comment when it wasn't just for Ms. McBride's motions. I have questions about lump sum appropriations that I'm just sorting through. So rather than voting yes on second reading, because we're going to come back to that third, I'm voting no on these. But great respect for the work that these organizations do. I have served on the board of some of these organizations in the past and serve on them right now for other organizations. So again, my vote is in no way reflective of the great work they do or the necessity to the community. I'm just sorting out my thoughts on an approach to lump sum appropriations in general. So that's the last time I'll make this comment though. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, I'm assuming that I don't know what some of these agencies do, and I don't know whether they have applications on file. So for any.
They all do, just answer your question.
So, yeah, so I would like to see the applications for all of them. In fact, anything that we're funding, I want to see the application for it.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Chair. Ms. Walker, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to continue my drumbeat year after year of pointing out the fact that our practice of giving away tax dollars to 501c3s, regardless of their imperativeness within the community. And to speak to that point, I actually donate personally pre-tax dollars so that I can enjoy the tax benefit of my donation. to some of the very entities mentioned. I think that needs to be reviewed. I think administration needs to weigh in on it. And I think we need to adjust fire, so to speak, on how we use our constituents' tax dollars for our individual enjoyment as far as giving to the charities that we see fit. So thank you.
Since this is my motion, let me quickly respond to that. I like, say to these agencies, give that message to these agencies and see what kind of response you would get. Also, too, I don't see it as giving away money to anybody. I see it as investing in our community and our citizens.
May I respond, Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Not only that I seek their opinion, but they seek my money, and I give it to them. So I get it. I understand it. I appreciate the mission and the role that they play in our communities. I just think that we need our administration to weigh in on whether or not it's appropriate to give tax dollars in this manner when individuals could enjoy the pre-tax benefit of them. Thank you.
Thank you. And just one last comment, and I'll leave it alone too. If our administrator would have made recommendations regarding these organizations, then I wouldn't be making the recommendation myself. Ms. McBride?
What's the total amount being requested here?
I think it came to $1,451,439.
1 million, okay, thank you.
Chair, may I give a point of clarification real quick?
Yes.
I meant to do this at the beginning. So keep in mind that because the county administrator is not recommending these as part of his budget, these will push the general fund total higher, and it'll cause you to use more of your fund balance. But I did want to just make sure that I made that clarification to council to make sure I followed administrator's instructions.
Yes, and no, that wasn't a reflection of administrator. I was just making the point as to why I made it because they weren't made. That's all. The only option to get them into the budget was to make the recommendation. Miss Mackey, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So based off of your motion, and I guess if I could ask Mr. Hayes, with that and the ones from the previous, what is that total, and what would that impact be then on the general fund?
So right, so essentially it would be Ms. McBride's 3 that she and then the additional 1,451,000 that's before council at the moment. So those two numbers combined, and I can add it up for you right quick.
Thank you.
So that would be 1,596,439. So that would be the 3 motions by Councilwoman McBride, and then the motion by Mr. Livingston. So that total is 1,596,439.
And what is that impact on the fund? You mentioned that it would raise our fund and we had to pull from reserves.
So you would have to, because the county administrator is not recommending those, it's not in his budget. So you would be utilizing additional fund balance dollars.
And that entire 1.5, if we move forward with Mr. Livingston, is that you're saying that entire amount would have to come from the fund balance, correct?
That's correct, because it's not a part of the administrator's recommendation.
Thank you.
Ms. Gresham, then Livingston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to request, if it can be repeated again, what is our fund balance?
Finance Director Ham, can I be recognized?
Yes, please.
Yes, our fund balance for unassigned fund balance at the end of last year was $43.5 million, which is 27%, which it needs to be between 20 and 35%. So we're around 27% of the prior year expenditures.
So to be clear, if I may, Mr. Chair, we're at 27% and we need to maintain no less than 25%.
I don't think it was 25, was it?
I thought that's what you just said.
I
20,
think 20%.
I thought it was 20%.
Okay, I
20%
misunderstood.
is the minimum, yes.
20% is the minimum. Okay. Thank you.
And Mr. Hayes,
Yes, sir.
how much did we spend last year from the general fund for lump sum appropriation?
Well, for current year budgeted, you see it's on the motion list, it's 2.3 million.
Okay, thank you.
So, and if I may give a clarification to Ms. Barron, so currently we have administration has recommended funding the budget using fund balance of 5.7 million. So that additional 1.6 million would raise that total. So administration is recommending using a portion of fund balance to balance the budget, but anything over that 5.7 million would cause you to draw down more of it. So I just want to give that point of clarification.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, thank you. Mr. Ratio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, I want to just be super duper clear on this. So any of the council member or these lump sum appropriations, whether they're in our budget book or they may come from future motions, that would be taken from not the general fund readily available funds, but rather pulled from the general fund balance.
That is correct, ma'am.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Ms. Malinowski, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hayes, you mentioned that for this year's budget, the administrator is recommending the use of 5.7 million of our general fund balance, correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
All right, is that amount already taken out of the amounts that Ms. Ham gave us of the fund balance and the percentages?
No, sir, it's not. So if I take out the 5.7, that brings us down to 23.5%.
All right, and then what if you took out the other 1.6 that's being asked for right now? Where does that put it?
Puts it at 22. Let me see. Here. 22.5.
22.5. Thank you. We're rather close to our minimum then. Thank you.
Mr. Ratio.
I'm sorry, my stream froze and I did not get the benefit of hearing Mr. Malinowski's question. I'm assuming he asked about if we withdrew these amounts of funds from the fund balance, then what percentage of reserve would we have? Is that the question?
Yes, that was a question in taking the 5.7 million the administrator recommended and up till now, the 1.6 that council members are recommending, it would put our fund balance at 22.5% or just over the 20% minimum required, not knowing what else will happen.
Thank you for repeating that, Mr. Malinowski.
You're welcome.
If there's no further questions, I'll ask.
Mr. Chair.
Is that Ms. Newton right here?
Yes, it is.
You
And
recognize.
I do have a question from a historical perspective. Again, as you mentioned, these are organizations that do great work and provide great service for our community. I'm wondering, were any of these ever, did we used to fund these in the general fund? Or when did the transition to making these come from lump sum appropriations happen? And I can get that answer later if that's easier.
Chair, may I be recognized?
Yes.
Yeah, Ms. Newton, the lump sum appropriation is in the general fund.
That is true. I guess I meant a different process perhaps, but you answered my question, so thank you.
Any further discussion? If not, if Masters, can you call the roll for the motion for item 28G.
Yes, sir. Malinowski,
No.
Hugh,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston, yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Joe Walker,
No.
Barron,
Yes.
Walker, Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
No.
Motion passes.
Now, can that bring us to item 28E? Again, that's a motion by Livingston, and that is from lump sum allocation. That is to move to fund the United Way at the amount requested, which was slightly lower than the amount they received last year, which was $281,445. So that's the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second for discussion.
Rachel, you recognize.
Second for discussion. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Yes.
You recognize
So
you.
we are, I guess previously, before we started this general fund discussion, I was not aware of, I guess, how deeply we'd be digging into the fund balance. And I supported this this initiative at the last at our last budget. I support the work. This is a pretty large amount for one entity that is. This would only be the second time it would be coming around. I just would hesitate to commit this at this level of funding at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Malinas, I'm sorry, Ms. McBride, you recognize.
Yes, I actually was one of the sponsors for this 2 years ago. And the request was to do a pilot project. And then once that pilot project was done, it was the understanding that the school districts, based on the evaluation, they would get the school districts to pick it up. Now, this request is to continue those 2 pilot projects and add an additional project. I believe that these projects should have been, and I do support the concept, should have been picked up by the school districts and not for the county to continue to fund this particular initiative. It's a lot of money, and we already have, the school district is aware of it, and I think it's their responsibility to continue it if they want it.
Thank you. Any further discussion? And again, we're on
Mr. Chair.
180. You may go ahead.
Thank you. Just me again. So before third reading, could we also get some information from administration about the anticipated funds that would come into Richland County from, I guess it's the American Rescue Plan, or is that the right one? The stimulus fund money, COVID stimulus money.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Teratio, that is correct. You're referring to the right pilot funds, the American Rescue Plan. That is something that we are actively looking into. We will not have, not just us, but there will not be definitive Treasury guidance as they currently have the question period over the next 60 days. You won't have definitive guidance until after the budget has been adopted based on the timeline provided by Treasury. So we can try to look at what organizations that we believe will likely comply with that and give it our best shot, with the understanding we might have to use those funds that we already have on our own. But we are looking into that. We just don't have definitive guidance yet. No one does actually.
Thank you. And so just as a follow-up, might we be able to reconsider, like have an opportunity to consider how those funds would be spent when the guidance is available? So even if someone is, even if an organization, say, was not funded because we were being out of an abundance of caution in this budget, that we might have a chance to consider other funding opportunities?
Yes, ma'am. And I believe the way that we actually pay out is quarterly. If and it's possible that we may be able to, I forgot, there's a certain threshold, but it's possible that you could award funding, and then that funding we may anticipate come out of general fund, but ultimately by the time it's time to be awarded, it may be able to come from a different source. So that's also possible.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Ms. Barron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Administrator Brown, thank you for addressing that point brought up by Ms. Terracio. And I just want to make sure or clarify, make sure I'm understanding. If we vote on these items, and it's approved in the third reading as a part of our final budget, we can switch the funds that we are paying out of. So instead of it coming out of our general fund budget, then we could have it come out of our relief funds.
That's correct.
Thank you.
May I ask a clarifying question on that, Mr. Chair?
Is that Ms. Newton?
Yes, it is.
You recognize?
Just quick clarifying question. In addition to what you just mentioned, Mr. Brown, isn't it also true that whatever we approve or don't approve, council at any time can make an amendment to the budget with 3 readings and a public hearing?
That is also correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Barron?
I'm finished, sir.
Any further, Ms. McBride?
Yes, I just also want to add, I've discussed this and I know that the school districts, the State Department of Education will also be receiving funding. So that is another opportunity for the school to step in. Thank you.
Thank you. There been anyone else to speak?
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Ms. Mannix, recognized.
Thank you. Administrator Brown, I may have missed it when you were answering Ms. Barron back there, but what's the approximate dollar amount that we may receive in relief funding?
Yes, sir. I'm going to answer the question broadly and specifically, Mr. Malinowski. Broadly, the county is expected to receive for the total course of the program, $80 million. We will receive that in 2 tranches. The first tranche that has been allocated to Richland County is roughly $40 million. Then no sooner than 12 months after we receive that, which we have already, you will, assuming that things keep going forward, we'll receive another $40 million, which will total again that $80 million.
I think maybe I asked my question wrong, Administrator. I'm trying to find out. The bulk of that is going to assistance for businesses or individuals, correct?
No, sir. That those funds under the American Rescue Plan can be used for a multiplicity of programs as outlined by the American Rescue Plan. So it can be going to those areas you just identified, but there are other areas it can also address. For just one quick example, sewer infrastructure, water and sewer infrastructure is one other example, but it is not limited to businesses and nonprofits.
Okay, so how much approximately of the 80 million will the county actually be getting?
The county will get all of the 80 million, 40 million up front, if you will, and then 12 months afterwards, or no sooner than 12 months afterwards, another 40 million.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that's coming to the county. None of that's going elsewhere.
No, sir, that's coming to the county.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other comments? If not, I'll ask the clerk to call for the vote for item, I think it's 28E.
Yes, sir. Malinowski,
No.
Hugh,
No.
McBride,
No.
Livingston,
Yes?
Teresa,
Vote no on this tonight.
Joe Walker,
No.
Barron,
No.
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey, English, Newton.
Yes for English.
Thank you. Newton, motion fails.
Mr. Chair,
Thank you. You recognize Mrs.
I just want to go on the record to say that I voted no tonight because I would like to see the organization or for us to consider funding them at a different level. A pilot is just that. It doesn't continue on. And if they've completed the pilot years for the first two schools, I would think that we should pull those out and move for additional funding, from the school district as they have already stated. And then I would be in favor of supporting the new pilot.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Is it
Ms. Mackey,
Ms. Mack? I'm sorry.
no problem. I just wanted to note for the clerk that I abstain from voting because I currently serve on the board of United Way. So I just stayed out of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to item 29. Mr. Hayes.
Yes, so these are some groups, some other lump sum groups that are not funded out of lump sum appropriations in the general fund, but they're funded out of other funds, with the exception of the Chamber of Commerce for BRAC. That is funded out of general fund, but not in under lump sum appropriations. That's out of non-departmental. So then you have the Congaree River Keeper, Keep the Midlands Beautiful, and River Alliance, and that grand total would be $168,900. But of course, the administrator has no recommendation.
Is there motion? Is there motion item 29?
May I ask a question of Mr. Hayes about what he just said?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Hayes, did you say that these groups used to be funded in places other than lump sum appropriations, but that for this year, you are moving them to lump sum appropriations?
No. What I'm saying, these groups are not funded out of the general fund lump sum appropriation. They're funded in other funds. For example, Keep the Midlands Beautiful is in solid waste. The Congaree River Keeper is in stormwater, and I believe River Alliance is in temporary alcohol. So they've been funded in other funds. The only other one that is funded in the general fund is the Chamber of Commerce for the Base Realignment Commission, but that's not in our lump sum. It's in non-departmental. So one of the four is also in the general fund, but not in lump sum appropriations, and the other three are in totally different funds altogether.
Okay. And so we have seen these numbers in other places. Then I guess my only other question would be for the administrator, which is Mr. Brown. I know that there was just some rumination at one point about how we might look at handling some of the litter in the county and potentially looking at handling some of these funds differently. Did anything ever come of that conversation?
Not yet, Ms. Newton. related to that. And so with these particular groups that you have here, while there is no recommendation, again, it's simply because these items that are funded are not tied to a specific project or a specific use other than the general services that are provided. So it's really the funding levels that the council is being asked to consider for these entities, because there's nothing specific to tie that funding to.
So I'm struggling with how to ask this question. So hypothetically, let's say that I was looking at the solid waste budget. And then I think you said that something of here was in the solid waste budget. If I looked at the total amount for that budget and the recommendations, does that mean that that project would not be there?
I'm sorry, let Mr. Brown answer.
No, go ahead, Mr. Hayes.
So the funding, so basically to tie what you and Mr. Brown are saying, so the funding for this particular grant is in solid waste, but like Mr. Brown said, it's not tied particularly to that program. It's at the pleasure of council. So the funding is there in the enterprise fund for solid waste, but for the Keep the Midlands Beautiful program, but you all don't have to allot those dollars for that particular grant program. So in other words, if you choose not to fund that grant program, the funds will remain in solid waste, and of course they can use it for something else. They can reprogram those funds.
Okay, and then said another way, not to put words in your mouth, these funds, because they exist in those other budget line items, are already fully represented in our budget, and so voting yes on this does not equate to funds that are taken out of our fund balance.
That's right. They're already funded. That's correct. The funds are already programmed. That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes.
I would, Livingston's next. I'd like to make this following motion regarding item 29. And that is to fund the Congaree River Keeper from the Stormwater Fund of the $20,000 as been done in the past 4 or 5 years at least. That would not affect the general fund. Also in that group, Keep the Midlands Beautiful. I'd like to fund them at the requested amount of $42,000, and that's going to be funded in the solid waste, so you can continue that. And also, I'd like to move that we fund the River Alliance at the $53,000 they've received for the last 10 or 15 years or 20 years from the temporary alcohol tax. That would not affect the administrator's budget, correct?
Yeah, that has nothing to do with the general fund, sir.
So my motion is to fund those 3 things because they're not tied to the general fund and they're coming from other sources.
Second.
And they've been funded from those same sources for some time now. And that's the motion for item 29. Is there a second? That's been moving properly second. Any discussion reference that motion?
I want a clarification.
You recognize Ms. Walker.
So you've basically, in that motion, you've excluded the Chamber of Commerce request for funding to lobby for the BRAC issues. Is that correct?
No, it had more to do with the general fund.
Could someone, for fear of redundancy, and I apologize, but so explain to me why the Columbia Chamber of Commerce for BRAC funding would be excluded from your motion?
Because it's from the general fund, and I'm getting beat up about motion from the general money from the general fund. So this was like their money's come from the general fund. That was more reason.
Okay, so the Columbia Chamber of Commerce funds would have an impact on the overall general fund, as opposed to the other 3 being in other organizations' budgets already, which is already accounted for in our general fund budget. Is that correct?
That's a question asked Mr. Hayes. Yeah.
Yeah, so right. So because it's not a part of lump sum appropriations, that 53,000 is already accounted for in non-departmental. So even if you voted it up or down, that funding, the money that's there could be reprogrammed to something else, but it is already a part of the administrative recommended budget.
So what,
So point of-
so it wouldn't
point of
affect the general
clarification.
fund?
Point of clarification.
That was my clarification too, whether it affect the general fund.
Well, I'm saying no, it would not increase. Well, let me answer the question. It would not increase over what the administrator has recommended. It will not do that, sir.
Okay, thank you. So I'll include that one too. That was my concern.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So that's my motion. To include those 4 items as listed on page, item 29.
Out of the general fund.
And it was second.
Yes, I second it.
Thank
But I think you may want to restate it. So if you don't mind, just restate it.
Right, it includes the 4 items to fund the Congaree River Keeper at the 20,000 from stormwater. The Chamber of Commerce for the BRAC funding. I don't know where it's coming from, but they said it's not coming from the general fund. Keep the Midlands Beautiful, 42,000 funded from solid waste. And River Alliance, 53 funded in the temporary alcohol.
One further point of clarification, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
As your motion listed as item 29A is an additional 53,000 for the River Alliance. Is that the same 53,000?
29 and 29A.
Okay, so that is one and the same. That is not 106,000. That is one $53,000 allocation to that entity.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Teresa, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions. The first one is that I believe that the Gills Creek Watershed Association is another entity that is historically funded from stormwater. Is that elsewhere in our budget book, or is that missing from our budget book?
Mr. Ratio, I'm not aware that may be something that was a part of conservation, but in terms of these, it's never been funded by way of these particular 4 groups. So no, that's something. If it is, it may be something that's a part of Conservation Commission, but it's never been a part of these other fund lump sum appropriations.
Oh, okay. I guess I was mistaken there. Okay, and then just total curiosity, how did the River Alliance come to be funded in temporary alcohol?
I will get you an answer to that from third. Me and staff have done some research on that. We'll try to get you an answer for third reading.
Okay, I just find that interesting. So thank you so much. I know you have a lot to do.
Ms. McBride, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, all of these entities are nonprofits. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, if you're asking me.
Oh, yes, sir. And they all, this request is for each one of them to receive county funds. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, if you're asking me.
Yes, sir. So regardless to the funding amount, you're saying they're not coming out of lump sum, but these are county funds that we want to give to these institutions or entities that are listed.
Yes, ma'am, they're different. Yes, they're county fund. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, but they're not. This will not affect our. I'm trying to get some clarification on our lump sum funding. Will this have an impact?
No, ma'am. So the lump sum funding is in a particular part of the general fund. So no, these groups, none of these 4 groups are part of the lump sum appropriation.
Okay.
The general
Okay.
fund.
So is it left up to the departments where these groups are located to determine whether they want to be funded or not if we don't pass this?
No, again, I don't want to speak for the administrator, but if you all opt not to fund, these groups don't have to be funded, So if council chooses not to fund them, then they won't be funded because you all approve all grant funding.
Okay. It's many, I've heard the name, but I actually don't know what they're doing, just like the other programs that we mentioned that we nonprofits that we don't know what they're doing. So I think all nonprofits, regardless of whether they're funded last year, year before last, or 5 years ago, we need to know what they're doing. And so they too need to submit applications like all other projects. If that's the way we're going to do it, we need to be consistent. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Miss, anyone else regarding items 29 and 29A? If not, Ms. Master, can you call the roll for the vote for items?
Mr. Chair, I've got my hand up there.
I'm sorry, thank you, Ms. I'm sorry, Ms. Mallon, I just can't see my whole screen here.
Okay.
Mr. Hayes. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Hayes, I'd like some clarification because it's either the way that you're saying it or the way I'm not hearing it. So you're telling me that these funds are already accounted for in other departments, which are part of the administrator's budget. So it seems to me by approving this number, we're approving it a second time if we approve those other departmental budgets.
No, so let me try to explain. So the dollar amount are part of, for example, let's use the Chamber of Commerce BRAC funding. Those funds are in non-departmental professional services. So there's a budgeted dollar amount for professional services in non-departmental. Historically, as part of that, the BRAC funding has been funded out of it. If you all opt not to spend the 53,000, then those 53,000 would simply be reprogrammed for some other usage.
I hear what you're saying, but if it's already being taken out in another area, why is it being taken out here a second time? Why is it even here if it's in another area?
No, okay, I understand what you're saying. What we're saying is the administrator recommended a funding level for the general fund and for the other funds. Specifically, any organization that's receiving county funds has to be approved by county council. So even though the funding level was approved, you still have to have the specifics of the organization be approved for that allotment.
Okay, so we're approving these groups to get this funding, which totals this much. It's not coming out a second time. It's already in the other.
Oh, that is correct, sir. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. And okay.
Any further discussion? If not, Ms. Master, can you call the roll for the motion regarding item 29 and 29A?
Certainly. Malinowski,
Yes.
Hugh,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Tracio,
Yes.
Joe Walker,
No.
Barron,
Yes.
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton, Newton,
Sorry, I was muted. No.
that was a no.
Correct.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. I think that's bringing us to special revenue bonds.
Yes, sir, that is correct. Item number 30.
And now, and these are all recommendations from the administrator, correct?
That is correct, sir.
Chair, entertain a motion regarding special revenue bonds.
Chair.
Mr. Mallon, as you recognize.
Thank you, sir. I'd make a motion that we approve items 30 through 45 at the administrator's recommended level.
Second.
There's a moving proper second for item 30 through 32, 45. And it's a proper second. Mr. Ray, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking again at the Conservation Commission Fund. So that 1,033,470, does that recommend, does that reflect, is that the $500,000? Can you explain that number to me? Where does that, is that the total, sum total of the $500,000?
No, so yeah, Chair, may I be recognized?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so as part of the recommended budget, that the $500,000 is the I think it's 891,500 is what the county auditor has projected for the $500,000. The remaining 140-some thousand, it will become from the fund balance of the Conservation Commission. So that 1,033,470 will be funded by the $500,000, and then also the rest of it will become from the Conservation Commission's fund balance, ma'am.
Okay, I didn't quite get those two numbers. Could you repeat both what the $500,000 is expected to bring in and also what the withdrawal will be?
Okay, so it's on page one. I'll get it for you so you can see it right in front
I'm
of
sorry, I got
you. No problem. It's on
so
page
into the
132.
spreadsheet. 132. Okay, yeah, I was so deeply into the spreadsheet that I forgot to move my budget book pages. Okay. Okay, great. So I see those on the page there. I think I will have some more questions in a little bit, but for now, I'll just leave that for a second.
Chairman Livingston, this is Leonardo. May I be recognized, sir?
Yes, please.
On that particular item, in reference to the questions Mr. Ratio is raising, and I think maybe raised a little bit earlier, I just want to remind everyone that this is not the final budget in terms of this is second reading, and I will be meeting again with the Conservation Commission and District scheduled for next week, and anticipate at least having an additional conversation with council after that. Thank you.
Ms. Rachel, any more questions?
No, thank you. I should lower my hand probably. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further discussion, reference special revenue bonds, further administrative recommendation? If not, I'll ask Mrs. Maxwell to call the roll for items 30 through 45.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Hugh,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horacio,
Yes. Oh, yes. Okay.
Joe Walker,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton. Yes. Motion passes.
Thank you. That brings us to debt service, Mr. Hayes.
So item number 46 is the debt service funds. Those are also recommended by the administrator.
The chair entertains a motion regarding debt service per the administrator's recommendation.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Malinowski, you recognize.
Thank you, sir. I would make a motion to approve the administrator's recommendation, debt service items 46 through 55.
Second.
Moving proper second, so you got to pay that whether you want to or not. In discussion referencing the debt service per the administration's recommendation. If not, I'll ask Ms. Mathis to call the roll for the motion.
Certainly. Malinowski,
Yes.
Hugh,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horacio. Horacio.
Sorry. Yes. Yes. Sorry.
Joe Walker,
Yes. And as part of a comment to that, would also admonish our administration to look at, in this low interest rate environment, what debt service we could actually refinance. Thanks.
Barron,
Yes.
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton. Yes. Motion passes.
Thank you. That brings us to enterprise fund.
Yeah, item number 56, and this also is a part of the administrator's recommendation.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Mallon, you recognize.
thank you. I would make a motion to approve the administrator's recommendation for items 56 through 58.
You heard the motion. Is there a second?
Yes, second.
Move proper second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Keys, you recognize. I'm sorry, Ms. Newton, you recognize.
No problem. I answered to that too. Quick question. Just wanted to get a reminder of what is being transferred from the general fund for the airport. And just to restate the comment I made in the work session that, you know, I look forward to seeing a plan where we can have be either more self-sustaining or where we have a conversation that says we're always going to transfer funds from the general fund for that. So the question is, what are we transferring from the general fund?
Right. So, Chair, may I be recognized?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So we did put that in the conveying document that was sent out before on the enterprise fund. But yeah, so it's the so the airport funds are have their own revenue, but the general fund supplements it like it does some other funds. So that transfer out is from the general fund is to help balance the budget for the airport.
Thank you. Yes, my question was just what is the amount? It would take me 10 minutes to find that budget companion document.
Oh, so this year, so it would be on. I can look that up for you right
now. I think it's $577,446.
Oh, that's the total budget. The general fund transfer. Let me give you. If you hold on, Mr. Rachel, I'll pull that up for you. I mean, Mr.
I would be happy to take that answer later.
All right. Okay, I'm almost there. So Ms. Newton, so for FY22, that number from the general fund transfer in would be 270,846. So of the 577,000 budget, 270,000 would come from the general fund. 270,846.
Thank you.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes,
Mr. Chair, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Mr. Hayes, could you repeat that just one more time? Again, I'm not writing fast as you're
no problem.
getting them out.
So of the total airport fund budget of 577,446, 270,846 will be a general fund transfer in. 270,846.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much.
Any further questions? If not, I'll ask Ms. Masters to call the roll.
Sir.
Yes, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Hugh,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horacio,
Yes.
Joe Walker,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Thank you. Newton,
Yes.
thank you. Motion passes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I want to remind you about 1A.
Yes. You may recall we put 1A, and that was the additional funding regarding the Recreation Commission for that request regarding the tennis court. You may recall the reason why it was pulled from the top there, because the 125, it would have added that to their request, or if we would have added to the amount that was appropriated also, it would have put them over the cap. So it has to be some other funding source regarding funding that item. So my recommendation would be for us to move back to third reading and decide how we want to handle it at that particular point as it relates to finding a funding source if we want to fund it at that rate.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Yes. Ms. Malnow, and then Ms. Thank you, Mr. Ratio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 51 in our agenda here in our motions list shows the Recreation Commission has a debt service of a little over $3.2 million. Maybe it's possible to get with the Recreation Commission, find out what that debt service is for, if they have some capital projects in there, and maybe the possibility exists, like the administrator has done with other matters for the county overall, find something that could be pushed back a little bit if this is more important and put this amount in there. That's just a suggestion for one area to possibly find the money. Thank you.
We'll have that conversation and bring it back to third reading. Any other questions about that item? We'll certainly bring it back to third reading.
English has her hand up, Mr. Chair.
Ms. English. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. English.
You're on mute.
She's on mute.
Ms. English, you're on mute. You're recognized.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. When we put them over the cap, does that mean that's a raise in taxes, citizens' taxes?
So may I be recognized? Yeah, so you cannot, by state statute, take an organization over the cap. But if you give an organization anything more than a no meal increases, yes, that would be a tax increase. But you cannot go above the cap.
And that's why we have to find it in additional sources, other resources.
Right. So I guess what, and not to speak for the chair, but I think you all are looking at possible other funding sources other than the operating millage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Now, Ms. English, to your question, now we still, what was passed tonight for the Recreation Commission was no millage change. So you can still add up to about $225,000 to their budget without a tax increase. Well, to the cap, which will not, which is the highest limit you can go. But you still have to find another 100,000 somewhere else to meet the
Mr. Livingston, I'm sorry, I just want to give a point of clarification. Now, if you do go to the cap, that is a tax increase. Anything that's not a tax increase will be a no meal increase.
No, what I mean is you can go to the cap. You just you can go up to another 225,000 if you choose to. But it wouldn't take them above the cap, is what I'm saying. If you increase the budget that you passed tonight for the Recreation Commission, you would take them to the cap, which you can legally go to. It may cause a small increase in taxes, but that wouldn't increase their millage rate, would it? Because that's not enough to make an impact on the mill, would it?
Yes, you would go. It would increase the millage rate, which the county auditor will bring to you all in the fall.
All right, thank you. Ms. Barron, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to stay on that point before I make my other point. So I just want to be clear, because we went around a little bit with that. If we take RCRC to the cap, to their cap, then there is not a tax increase.
Mr. Hayes is saying that there is.
Right. Yes, Ms. Barron. So the county auditor provides everyone with two numbers: a no tax increase number and a cap number. So anything more than a no tax increase would definitely raise taxes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so to that point, that changes my whole thought process. Is it possible that we could even look at other funding from, I know I've had lots of conversation with RCRC and many local groups who are in support of the repairs of the tennis court. Is it possible that this could even qualify for hospitality tax dollars?
May I be recognized?
Yeah.
Yeah, so typically we do not fund recreation with H-tax dollars, but if the organization was to put together a project that is H-tax compliant, like bringing in tourists for some type of tournament, then it could quite possibly, but it would have to be, H-tax is very specific. It would have to be something that generates tourism.
And it would, and then to that point, the entity that we would make the award to would not necessarily be RCRC, but it could be a nonprofit. Or could RCRC qualify for H-tax dollars, even though they are a millage agency?
Oh, they could, absolutely. Absolutely. If as long as the project is H-tax compliant, they could use that for, you know, it would have to be, it would have to be that the project itself is H-tax compliant.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to say, I'd love to see how we could figure out to make this work. This is not necessarily something new. This is something that we currently have that's falling apart.
Thank you. Let me, I just have one question for staff for clarification regarding the fund balance. I remember receiving some information looking at the fund balance as of June 30th, 2020. The numbers were much higher than the numbers I was given tonight, and I need for someone to explain to me why those numbers are so different. When I got numbers regarding the non-suspendable, the committed and assigned and unassigned amounts of dollars for the fund balance, they were very different from the low number I was given tonight. I remember that sheet had unassigned fund balances at $43 million. Can someone explain to me what's the difference between these numbers and what's being shared now?
These numbers are the numbers that are from the CAFR. The unassigned fund balance is the $43 million. When you add the non-spendable, committed, and assigned, it's a total of 68.4, which, and all of this is in the FY20 financial statement. So the 43.5 is the unassigned.
So what was the 20-something number you gave earlier?
The percentage, 27% of the prior year's expenditures. Okay. And then if we start spending up the money, then that's when it brought it down.
So 43 million is the 27%.
Yes, the 43 million is the 27%. And then we're already spending 5.7 of it. And then we were spending another 1.6, which brought it down to what, 22.5%. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I just want colleagues to be familiar with the amount. That's 43 million. Okay, thank you. Ms. Barron, did your hand still up?
I'm finished, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that was the last item, Mr. Do we have to make, what about
Mr. Chair?
The ordinance?
Mr. Chair, before we move on, can I have one more question on this item?
Let me ask staff this question so I won't forget though. Oh, okay. Mr. Hayes, you know, during the year, we have to actually pass an ordinance. That's at the end?
That right. So once you all have finished your question, I was going to remind you, yes, you have to pass the budget ordinance and the millage ordinance. You've done first reading by title only. So you'll have to do the second readings for the budget ordinance and the millage ordinance. We typically do that at the very end of our reading. So once you all complete your questions, then that'd be the very last thing would be to read.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we didn't forget that. That was my point. Thank you.
Well, I wasn't gonna let you get that.
Ms. Newton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a content question and I guess a process question. So the process question is, unless I missed it, you were talking about bringing this for third reading, but was there a motion on the floor for this?
A motion for what? I'm sorry, I could barely hear this.
I'm sorry, I have no idea what's happening with my sound. For item 1A, I don't recall there being a motion. I just recall us discussing it. Am I mistaken?
Yes, yeah, we did discuss it, but I like to make a motion that we bring that back for third reading.
Okay, and then I guess my next question is, and maybe this is for the Recreation Commission, but I would like some sort of update from them on what their maintenance plan looks like, or if they want to do this as part of their debt service, because there are a lot of parks and properties that they have that I don't want to necessarily say are falling apart, but certainly need some love to be serviceable in communities. And I can name some parks that are pretty much the only recreation that are available in those areas. And so if we're looking at this one area, I guess I would want to make sure that we're looking more broadly than that at how we're allocating funds to them and how they are handling their maintenance. So that's all. Thanks.
So just for the record, I'll just entertain a motion that we bring this back for consideration.
Chair, my hand is up.
Thank you, Ms. McBride. You recognize.
Thank you. I agree with Ms. Newman in terms of what she stated about some of the facilities at Parks and Recreation. They do get millage funding. And I'm wondering why the maintenance was not taken care of. And also I'm wondering, of course, we do a lot of blanket approval of budgets, I believe. They submit budgets and we basically approve the millage agency budgets. We don't really do a thorough review. And I don't know whether we can do anything other than approve the amount that is mandated through the ordinance. But with Parks and Recreation, we go over the minimum. I think that's why we're probably at the cap anyway, because I think, and Mr. Hayes, each year I have to do this. They get 7%. Could you explain that in terms of how much money millage funds they get? Mr. Chair, if I can speak to Mr. Hayes.
Ms. Hayes, you have a question?
I'm sorry. I think if I'm understanding you correctly, I think you're saying you're going back to what the ordinance says they have to be funded at versus what we actually fund them at. I think that's,
yes, sir.
Yeah, Ms. McBride, I certainly can get those numbers for you. But
okay.
Yeah.
I think it's like at 7%, and then we go up to 5%. We go additional 5%. So we do, I think it's something like 13%, but we go above what's required every year.
Right. There's a base amount, and I'll make sure that me and my staff get that information for third read.
Okay, so we always go above the base. And I think it's like from 7 to we go up to 13%. But in their budget request, if this is so important, and I do agree we need it, why is this not a part of their request of Parks and Recreation? And I think we're going to have to prioritize. We might not be able to fund all the tennis courts. I think that maybe we might be able to find some funding to help the main ones that are in need. And then I think the Parks and Recreations need to look at their budget, their maintenance budget or whatever, and provide those funding, the funding that's required or needed. I think we're going inside the agencies and then we're telling them their priorities.
Thank you, Ms. Horatio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm going to come back with this item, but go ahead.
Okay. My question actually is, I wanted to make sure that we got it in before things were brought back to us, because I'm hearing from my colleagues, there's definitely not a desire to raise anyone's taxes. But my question for information would be what would be the impact to the average, Richland County citizen. If a number, some example numbers maybe could be given, I think that would just be helpful. If it's a matter of $2 per person, maybe that's worth it.
Mr. Ratio, we'll have the county auditor provide that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And again, we may not necessarily need a motion, but just for the record, the motion will be just as, in fact, we'll bring that back before council next meeting after conversations with Recreation Commission, whomever we need to talk to. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Moving proper second, we just bring that back. You're not approving it. Mrs. Mathis, can you call the roll for the motion?
Certainly. Malinowski,
No.
Pugh,
Yes.
McBride,
Yeah, I vote to bring it back. That's all.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teresa,
Yes.
Joe Walker,
No.
Barron,
Yes.
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
No, with the, there's so many people that have lost so much during COVID. I would hate to see any taxes being raised at any level because they've lost jobs and so much. So my answer for that is no.
Newton,
Hello, can you hear me now?
yes.
Actually, yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. I think that completes all the items. Now what's before us is the ordinances that's related to the budget on the agenda that you received. And first is the ordinance to raise revenues, make appropriations, and adopt an annual budget for fiscal year 2022 for Richland County, South Carolina, for a fiscal year beginning July 1, 2021 and ending June 30, 2022. So as to raise revenues, make appropriations, amend the general fund, millage, agencies, special revenue funds, enterprise funds, debt service funds, budget Richland County, South Carolina, fiscal year beginning July 1, 2021 and June 30, 2022. And the second part of that is an ordinance authorizing a levy of Avalon property taxes, which together with a prior year's carryover and other state levies and any additional amount appropriated by Richland County Council prior to July 1, 2021, will provide sufficient revenues for operation of Richland County government during the period of July 1, 2021 through June 30, 2022. Those are just ordinances that would accompany the final passage of the budget later on. Chair, entertain a motion for adoption of those ordinances. The first reading.
So
No,
moved.
second reading.
So moved.
Mr. moved.
Second.
Properly second. In discussion. Mrs. Mathis, could you call the roll for the adoption of the budget ordinance?
Certainly. Malinowski,
No.
Pugh,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teresa,
Yes.
Joe Walker,
No.
Barron,
Yes.
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Mr. Hayes, Mr. Brown, anything else to come before the body regarding the second reading of the budget?
Excuse me. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes.
That's what I want to make sure. So that motion just now, it included both the budget ordinance and the village ordinance. You read both of them, correct?
I read both of them, yes.
Okay, just want to make sure, but that's all I had, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's nothing else, Mr. Chair. We appreciate your.
Move to adjourn.
There's a motion for adjournment. Is there a second?
Second.
It's moving properly second. Mrs. Mathis can call the roll for the motion to adjourn.
Certainly Malinowski,
Yes.
Hugh,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Tracio,
Yes.
Joe Walker,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Meeting's adjourned. Have a great rest of the evening.
All right.